Chapter 1: The Open Road. The road wound northward through the foothills, a ribbon of pale dust cutting through wild meadows and low pines. The air was clear and sharp after the springs, cool enough that breath lingered in faint clouds when the wind shifted. Kaelen walked ahead, broad shoulders swaying beneath his pack, while Priscilla skipped at his side, humming tunelessly and stopping every few steps to crouch over wildflowers or shiny stones. A few paces behind, Izzi and Sirius kept a slower rhythm. The sound of their boots mingled with the quiet rustle of grass. Izzi absently toyed with the silver cuff on her ear, the twin to the one she'd once seen gleam in Lysandra's ear, her fingers tracing the etched curve again and again. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it wanted to be broken. She glanced at Priscilla ahead, the dragon in human skin twirling a stalk of wheat like a wand, her laughter carried back on the breeze. "I know she's a dragon and all," Izzi finally said, her tone light but thoughtful. "But I still get nervous for her when things turn rough." Sirius's brow twitched. "Because she clings to arms instead of drawing blades?" Izzi huffed a quiet laugh. "That's one way to put it. She's timid by nature, sure," he said, eyes on the horizon. "But when push comes to shove, she can buckle down and turn a battlefield into ash. Remember when you saw her the first time? How calm she was, prancing over the slaver before setting him ablaze? The fire in her isn't gone, it's just restrained." Sirius's gaze softened. "I'm her anchor of sorts. Keeps her from losing herself when the heat rises." Izzi smirked, half to herself. "True. I suppose she doesn't need protection after all." They walked a few more paces in silence. The wind caught Izzi's hair, tossing a few copper strands across her face. Her hand dropped from her ear, brushing against the small scar at the corner of her lip. "She's lucky," Izzi said quietly, "to have someone like you, someone who steadies her." Sirius glanced at her, puzzled but didn't press. Izzi's gaze lingered on Kaelen's back ahead of them. She thought of Celine's fire, of the way her breath used to seize in her throat when that cruel voice whispered her name, of Kaelen's hand on her shoulder, always there, solid as stone. Her anchor. She smiled faintly. "Everyone needs someone who keeps them from falling apart." Sirius's reply was soft, almost lost to the wind. "Some more than others." The road stretched onward, the mountains just a smudge of blue on the far horizon. The air smelled of pine and sun-warmed dust, and for a while, neither of them spoke again. Sirius's gaze drifted forward to where Kaelen and Priscilla walked. The orc's stride was steady and patient, while Priscilla flitted at his side, pointing at things with childlike enthusiasm, a hawk circling above, a patch of silver moss, a crooked fence post shaped like a heart. Sirius reached into his coat pocket, drawing out a small silver flask. The motion was subtle, practiced, like the 100 times before. He uncorked it with a quiet click, brought it briefly to his lips, and took a slow drink. Izzi's ears twitched at the sound. Her eyes narrowed with faint curiosity, and she arched a brow. "You're always sneaking sips of that stuff," she said, half teasing. "What is it you're drinking all the time? Must be good, you seem to always have some on you." He lowered the flask, turning it in his hand before answering. "Rum." "Rum, huh?" she said, pretending to sound unimpressed. "Haven't had a good drink in a while." She held out her hand expectantly, eyes bright with challenge. "Let me taste it." Sirius hesitated, the faintest crease forming between his brows. The request seemed to catch him off guard, not for what it was, but because it came from her. For a heartbeat, he said nothing. Then, wordlessly, he held out the flask. Izzi grinned. "Thanks." She took it without ceremony and tipped it back for a generous sip. The burn hit instantly, hot, sharp, and smoky. Her eyes went wide and she swallowed hard, then coughed violently. Sirius's lips twitched, not quite a laugh, but amusement flickered there all the same. Up ahead, Kaelen glanced over his shoulder. "Everything all right back there?" Izzi raised a shaky thumbs up between coughs. Just great," she rasped, blinking through watery eyes. Priscilla turned at the sound, her expression unimpressed. She crossed her arms, eyes narrowing at Sirius like a scolding sister. "Sirius," she said under her breath. Sirius recorked the flask and slipped it back into his coat, unconcerned. She asked. Priscilla huffed, flicking her braid over her shoulder as she turned back toward Kaelen. "Impossible," she muttered. Izzi wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, still smirking. "Worth it," she said, her voice rough but triumphant. Sirius gave her a sidelong look, faintly amused. You didn't vomit. I'd call that a success. The road stretched on beneath the bright midday sun, the laughter fading into the breeze as they walked. The day stretched long and unhurried, the road ahead unfurled like a ribbon of pale stone through the hills, winding between tall grasses that whispered in the wind. The mountains were distant, yet hazy blue shapes half swallowed by clouds, and the land between here and there seemed endless. Birds wheeled lazily overhead, their calls echoing faintly across the open fields. Every so often they passed an old milestone, half-buried and worn smooth by time, or the remains of a way station, a crumbled arch, ivy curling through its bones. The world felt vast and quiet, the kind of silence that swallowed thoughts whole. There was beauty in it, even if the path itself held little promise beyond the next bend. Up ahead, Kaelen walked with his usual steady stride, boots crunching softly on the gravel. Priscilla danced rather than walked, weaving from one side of the road to the other, humming a tune that didn't seem to have an end or beginning. Her braids swayed behind her like a crimson ribbon catching the light. Kaelen found himself watching her, not in fascination exactly, but in that quiet disbelief reserved for people who seemed untouched by the weight of the world. She was carefree in a way he couldn't quite understand. She felt his stare, then suddenly turned mid-step, raised both hands like claws, and opened her mouth wide. Rah! Kaelen froze. His eyes went wide, and he instinctively stumbled a step back, clutching his chest. By the gods, he started, half growl, half laugh. Priscilla burst into delighted laughter, her cheeks pink from the effort. Kaelen exhaled, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like a curse. You nearly took a year off my life. Still giggling, she skipped ahead. Kaelen shook his head, grumbling under his breath, though a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Behind them, Izzi's quiet laugh carried on the breeze, and even Sirius allowed himself a small, hidden smirk as the long road rolled ever onward beneath their feet. Izzi and Sirius eventually caught up, the crunch of their boots mingling with the fading sound of Priscilla's laughter up ahead. Kaelen was still muttering under his breath, rubbing the spot on his chest where he'd clutched his heart. His scowl deepened more from embarrassment than anger. Izzi's grin was immediate. You? Scared of her? I thought orcs didn't flinch at anything smaller than a warhammer. Kaelen shot her a look. She's not exactly small. Well, not really. Sirius brushed past, giving Kaelen's shoulder a light slap as he passed. Get a grip, man. Izzi laughed harder, doubling down. Careful, Kaelen. She might war again if you're not paying attention. Kaelen groaned, dragging a hand down his face. When exactly did my position in this group get turned upside down? Sirius smirked over his shoulder. About the time she started breathing fire. That earned a quiet chuckle from Izzi, and even Kaelen couldn't help but shake his head, grinning despite himself. Ahead, Priscilla had skipped a good distance farther down the path, her braid catching the evening light. Sirius lifted a hand and called out to her, his voice carrying easily across the empty road. Priscilla! Enough wandering, we'll find a clearing off the road and make camp before nightfall. She paused mid-step, gave a quick nod without a word, and moved toward the tree line to scout for a spot. The sun hung low now, painting the horizon in soft amber. The group's laughter faded into the steady rhythm of their footsteps, the promise of rest just ahead. The road curved away into the trees, and the group veered off where the grass grew high and the earth dipped into a small hollow beside a stream. The clearing was quiet and open enough to see the road through the branches, but far enough to keep them hidden from passing eyes. The sun was sinking low now, a red-gold haze stretching through the canopy. Izzi dropped her pack first and began laying out the bedrolls, humming softly as she shook the dust from the worn canvas. Kaelen was a few paces away, crouched near a half-dug pit lined with stones. He struck flint against steel, sparks jumping uselessly into the cool evening air. Come on, he muttered under his breath, adjusting the kindling again. Priscilla, who had been quietly stacking their packs against a fallen log, glanced over. After a moment's hesitation, she brushed the dirt from her skirt and crossed the clearing. She crouched beside him, watching for a few seconds with an expression caught somewhere between curiosity and amusement. Kaelen looked up mid-strike. Yes? Priscilla only smiled faintly, the kind that curved her lips without showing teeth. She turned toward the pit, leaned close, and with a quiet breath, released a short, controlled puff of flame. The wood caught instantly, flaring bright and warm. Kaelen blinked, sitting back on his heels, the light reflecting off his tusks. Right? He said, nodding in impressed approval. That works. Fire, Priscilla said simply, still smiling. Kaelen let out a low chuckle. "Thanks." She gave a small nod and retreated to her place by the log, drawing her knees to her chest and watching the fire grow. A few steps beyond the edge of the clearing, Sirius leaned against a tree, eyes scanning the woods. His posture was relaxed, but his hand rested lightly on the hilt of one of his blades. The orange glow from the new fire flickered against his coat, casting long shadows across his face. From his vantage point, he could see them all. Izzi spreading blankets beside the fire, Kaelen testing the heat of the flames, and Priscilla sitting quietly, her face soft in the firelight. For a brief moment, the scene almost looked like something out of an old memory, a fragile piece carved out of the wild. Kaelen rummaged through his pack, pulling out a small bundle of vegetables wrapped in cloth, a few potatoes, onions, and some wilted greens that had survived the road. He set to chopping them with his dagger on a flat stone, tossing the pieces into a small tin pot as the fire crackled to life. "Not much," he muttered, "but it'll keep us from starving." Sirius, still standing at the edge of the clearing, straightened. "I'll see what I can find nearby, something with meat, if luck's kind." Izzi glanced up from her bedrolls, eyebrow raised. "You hunt too?" He shrugged once. "I do a lot." Before he could take a step into the trees, Priscilla quietly rose and moved to his side. She didn't say a word, just fell into step with him, her eyes following the tree line. Sirius gave her a single look, brief but understanding, and together they disappeared into the woods. The clearing grew quieter once they were gone, the only sound the soft hiss of the fire and Kaelen's knife against stone. Izzi sat cross-legged near him, arms draped over her knees, watching him work. "You know," she said after a while, her voice light, "despite everything, it's nice, having company for a change." Kaelen grunted in agreement, stirring the pot with a stick. "Aye, beats sleeping with one eye open," she smiled faintly. "Still feels strange sometimes. Being this," she gestured loosely at the small camp. "Normal." Kaelen smirked, glancing over. "Normal? You? The woman who picks fights with sorceresses and drinks half a flask of rum in one go?" "Fair," she admitted, chuckling softly. "Still," she sighed, leaning back on her hands, eyes on the fire. "I need some." Kaelen barked out a laugh, nearly dropping the stick. "Ha! Been a while, huh?" Izzi shot him a mock glare. Sure," he said, grinning wide. "Avaran, was it? Or maybe Horian at Cerulea's Rest?" Her ears flicked sharply. "Nothing happened with Horian." "Didn't say it did." Izzi smirked, tossing a pebble at him. "You're impossible." Kaelen caught it mid-air, laughing low in his throat. The sound was warm and real, one of the few times she'd heard it outside of battle. For a moment, they both just watched the fire, comfortable in the silence it offered. Kaelen's eyes drifted toward the tree line where Sirius and Priscilla had vanished. When he looked back at Izzi, he caught the faintest trace of her gaze doing the same. The direction, the lingering softness there. He said nothing, just stirred the pot again, his grin fading into something knowing, something almost protective. Before long, the brush rustled. Sirius emerged with a pair of rabbits hanging from one hand, Priscilla close behind, her cheeks flushed from the cool night air. "Dinner," Sirius said simply. Kaelen rose to meet him, nodding appreciatively. "Good work. I was starting to think we'd be chewing bark." Sirius handed over the catch without comment, his green eyes flicking briefly toward Izzi before he went to clean his blades at the stream. Izzi watched him go, her smirk returning, faint, thoughtful, and just a little guilty. Kaelen set his tools beside the fire, a whetstone, his hunting knife, and a small bundle of cloth he used for dressing game. He crouched down and laid the 2 rabbits on a flat stone, the soft light from the flames catching the pale shimmer of his tusks. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost reverent. "Best not to waste anything," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. With practiced ease, he drew the blade down the first rabbit's belly. The knife moved cleanly, parting fur and skin with quiet precision. He peeled back the hide in smooth, sure motions, folding it neatly aside before working the blade along the bone. The smell of fresh game mingled with the faint scent of smoke. Izzi and Sirius sat across from him, the firelight flickering between them. Izzi rested her chin on her knees, watching Kaelen's hands with idle curiosity. Sirius leaned back against a fallen log, silent as always, but his eyes were fixed on the work, assessing, perhaps appreciating the precision. Once Kaelen finished cleaning both rabbits, he rinsed them with a splash of water from his flask, wiped his hands on a rag, and began cutting the meat into sections. His motions were careful but efficient, each cut clean and sure. He worked in silence until a soft sound broke it, a faint, curious hum from behind him. Priscilla had stepped closer, head tilted, her eyes following the knife's movements. She crouched beside him, her long braid brushing her shoulder as she leaned in to watch. Kaelen glanced sideways, surprised but not unkind. "You want to learn?" Priscilla hesitated, glancing from him to the meat, then gave a small, uncertain nod. He smiled slightly, setting down the knife for a moment. "All right. It's simple once you know the rhythm. You don't rush it, you just follow the shape nature already gave it." She nodded again, eyes fixed on his hands as he picked up the knife and began to show her. "Start here," he said, guiding the blade along a joint. "See? Bone tells you where to cut. You listen to it." Priscilla's gaze followed every movement, silent and intent. She didn't speak, but her focus was absolute. Kaelen spoke quietly as he worked, explaining the angle of the blade, the feel of resistance, the difference between cutting too deep and not enough. Once the pieces were ready, he set a small pan over the fire, laid the meat in, and sprinkled in a pinch of salt and herbs from his pouch. The sizzling smell drifted through the camp, rich and earthy. Priscilla stayed crouched beside him, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes bright in the firelight. Every so often, she'd glance up at Kaelen, as if to silently ask what came next. He'd gesture or explain in short, simple instructions, his voice steady and patient. Across the fire, Izzi smiled faintly. "Didn't think I'd ever see you giving cooking lessons." Kaelen grunted, poking at the pan. "Didn't think I'd ever have a student." Sirius's lip twitched, a smile. Izzi laughed softly, and Priscilla's mouth curved just a little, not quite a smile, but close. She turned back to the pan, eyes following the flicker of flame as if committing every detail to memory. The fire crackled, shadows danced across their faces, and for a brief while the world beyond the clearing, the long road, the looming mountains, the hunters in the dark, felt far away. Night had settled fully over the clearing by the time the meat was cooked. The forest had gone quiet save for the hum of insects and the soft crackle of the fire. Shadows of the trees stretched long and deep, broken only by the flickering glow that ringed the camp in warmth. Kaelen gave the pan one last turn, nodding to himself in approval. "All right," he said, his deep voice steady but softened by the hour. "Dinner's ready." He portioned the rabbit and vegetables carefully, dividing them into tin bowls from his pack. When he finished, he turned to Priscilla, who still sat near the fire, watching the embers dance. "Chef," he said with a grin, holding out 2 of the bowls. "Take these to our fearless wanderers, will you?" She blinked, startled by the title, but accepted the bowls with delicate hands. Rising to her feet, she moved quietly across the clearing, her steps almost soundless in the grass. She reached Sirius first. He was still sitting near the tree line, one knee drawn up, eyes on the dark woods beyond the camp. She knelt beside him, holding out the food without a word. Sirius looked over, meeting her gaze briefly. He nodded once. "Thanks, Pris." Priscilla gave a small nod in return before moving toward Izzi. Izzi accepted her bowl with a smile. "Thanks, Priscilla. Smells good." Priscilla's lips curved faintly, a ghost of pride, and she returned to the fire where Kaelen was already filling the last 2 bowls. "Here," Kaelen said, handing her one. "You helped. That earns you a bit extra." He winked, the firelight glinting off his tusks. Her eyes lit, glowing faintly gold in the dark. Without a word, she threw her arms around him in a quick, impulsive hug. Kaelen froze mid-motion, nearly spilling both bowls. "Careful," he barked, though his tone carried more surprise than anger. He handed her the bowl with exaggerated caution. "You nearly lost your share before tasting it." Priscilla's laughter was quiet, soft enough that it almost vanished under the crackle of the fire. She retreated to her place by the log, sitting cross-legged and eating in slow, content bites. Sirius eventually joined the circle, setting his flask aside for once. "Good meal," he said simply, raising his bowl slightly toward Kaelen. Kaelen nodded. "You found the game. Credits shared." Izzi leaned back on her elbows, smiling lazily at the 2 of them. "Your cooking hasn't diminished in the slightest," she said. Kaelen grunted. "Still alive, aren't you?" "Barely," she teased. The group fell into an easy quiet after that, the kind that comes only when the stomach's full and the night's kind. The fire's glow painted them all in shades of amber and gold. Sirius half lost in shadow, Priscilla's eyes reflecting the light like twin embers, Izzi resting with a faint smile, and Kaelen tending the flames with his steady hand. The fire had burned down to a steady glow, its embers pulsing softly in the dark. Crickets had taken up their quiet chorus beyond the clearing, and the cool night air carried the faint scent of pine and smoke. Kaelen stretched with a low groan, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm spent," he said, rising to his feet. "Wake me if something decides to eat us." "Wouldn't dream of it," Izzi murmured. He snorted, stepping away from the fire and toward his bedroll. Within moments, the steady sound of his breathing joined the hum of the night. Priscilla gave a long, cat-like stretch, her arms arching above her head before she burrowed into her bedroll. She had tucked herself close to Sirius's, close enough that the edge of her blanket brushed his boot. Within minutes, her breathing had slowed, soft and even. Izzi pulled her own blanket around her shoulders and sank back against her pack, but sleep wouldn't come. The stars above were sharp and clear, and her mind refused to still. Every rustle in the dark set her ears twitching. Every snap from the fire reminded her she was awake when she shouldn't be. Across the clearing, Sirius was still sitting upright near the tree line, half in shadow. He'd said earlier he'd keep watch for a while, and true to his word, he hadn't moved from his post. The faint orange light caught the edge of his jaw, the glint of metal in his hands. After what felt like an hour, Izzi sighed and slipped quietly from her bedroll. She moved carefully, avoiding the creak of her leathers and the shifting of the fire's coals, until she stepped past Kaelen's sleeping form and into the cool grass beyond. As she drew closer, she saw it. His hand, the bandaged one, clenched tight around a dagger. The blade tip dragged lightly across his palm, tracing slow, deliberate lines. For a heartbeat, she thought it might be blood glinting there. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Sirius?" He startled just slightly, enough to show he hadn't expected anyone awake. His head turned toward her, and in a single smooth motion, he closed his fist, wiped the dagger clean against his boot, and sheathed it. "Just sharpening my blades," he said evenly. Izzi frowned faintly but didn't press. "Didn't look like that." He didn't answer right away, just looked at her in that quiet, unreadable way of his, green eyes catching the faint glow of the coals. Finally, he said, "You should be asleep." She shrugged, drawing her cloak tighter around herself. "Couldn't. Thought maybe you could use some company." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. He shifted slightly to one side, wordlessly leaving space for her beside him. Izzi stepped closer, the grass cool beneath her bare feet, and settled down beside him at the edge of the firelight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The night hummed softly around them, distant wind, the faint bubbling of the stream, the crackle of dying embers. Sirius reached for the flask lying in the grass beside him. The metal caught the starlight as he uncorked it, taking a small sip before lowering it again. Izzi glanced over, the corner of her mouth quirking. "For someone who always looks half asleep, you'd think you'd actually sleep more." That earned a faint sound, not quite a laugh, but close. He turned the flask in his hand, then offered it to her. "Small sips this time." She took it carefully, her fingers brushing his as she lifted it. "Noted," she said, and raised it to her lips. The rum burned her throat, but she managed this time. No coughing fit, no sputtering. She swallowed, exhaling softly, eyes never leaving his. They sat in silence for a heartbeat. The night air was cool and sweet, carrying the smell of grass and distant water. The stars hung heavy above them, so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Izzi shifted slightly, her voice lowering. "Your hand. Is it okay?" Sirius looked down, following her gaze to his bandaged hand. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, without hesitation, he opened his palm and turned it toward her. "See? Fine." The skin was unbroken, smooth under the dim light, no blood, no marks. Izzi blinked, frowning faintly. She could have sworn she'd seen him cutting into it. "Maybe I'm seeing things," she murmured. "Don't worry," he said quietly. She looked up, confused, but his expression gave nothing away. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind stirring through the leaves. Sirius leaned back against the log, eyes tracing the stars as if searching for something. "I feel like I wanted to ask you something," Izzi said softly, almost to herself. "But I can't for the life of me remember what." He was silent for a while, as if weighing the air. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost hesitant, something rare for him. "Yes," he said. "Back when you were injured, you said you remembered me." Izzi's head turned toward him, her brow furrowing. Sirius's gaze met hers. "You were right. You do." He hesitated just a breath before continuing. "I was there. At your exile. In Valoran." The words landed like a spark in her chest. Izzi's breath caught. Her eyes widened as memory flooded back, flashes of that hall, the crowd of elves, the heavy silence before the sentence was spoken. The faces blurred by tears and shame, but one face, his, at the edge of the gathering, sharp and watchful even then. Her lips parted, the flask forgotten in her hand. "You," she started, her voice breaking on the word. He didn't move, didn't look away, only the faintest flicker of guilt passed behind his eyes. The night held its breath around them. Sirius watched her reaction carefully, the flash of recognition in her eyes, the way her breath caught on unfinished words. For a moment, she looked ready to ask a dozen questions all at once, but none came. He reached out and rested a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture from him, steady and grounding. "Relax," he said quietly. Izzi blinked, forcing herself to breathe. The contact, brief as it was, pulled her from the flood of memory. She tried to chase the fragments of that day, faces, names, voices, but it all dissolved into fog the harder she reached for it. "I can't remember much else," she murmured. Sirius exhaled slowly, leaning back against the log again. "There's not much to remember," he said, voice low. "I only happened to be there with my mother. Nothing more, nothing less. I was saying goodbye to her." Izzi frowned, her brows knitting. His mother? That wasn't what she'd expected. Valoran was known for its rigid bloodlines, an elven city obsessed with purity and heritage. Even being half-human was enough to draw scorn, sometimes exile. "But," she began, uncertainty in her voice, "Valoran doesn't allow—" "I know what you're thinking," Sirius interrupted softly. He lifted the flask again, taking a small sip before continuing. "And you're right. No one was ever particularly fond of me there." He turned the flask idly in his hands, the firelight flickering against the silver. "But my mother, Morgana." Izzi straightened sharply, cutting him off. "Lady Morgana was your mother?" He glanced at her, the faintest trace of surprise crossing his face at her tone. Izzi's voice dropped to a whisper. "She was one of the High Council, one of the oldest elves in Valoran. Everyone knew her name." Sirius nodded once. "Yes, that's her." He stared into the darkness beyond the firelight, his voice quiet, almost reverent. And despite everything Valoran demanded of her, she fell in love with a human. Izzi stared at him, unable to find her words. It was a thought that would have been unthinkable in Valoran, a scandal buried so deep that only whispers would dare carry it. Sirius gave a faint, humorless smile. "I was the result of that mistake. And when she died..." His voice faltered for the briefest second, then steadied. "There wasn't much reason for me to stay. I only came back for the burial." The fire crackled between them, a low hiss filling the silence. Izzi's gaze softened as she watched him, the pieces of his quiet reserve finally making sense, the way he carried himself on the edges of things, never quite belonging anywhere. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The night breeze swept gently through the clearing, stirring the embers, and for a moment the two of them sat there in perfect stillness, two exiles beneath the same stars, bound by scars from the same city that had cast them out. Izzi sat quietly for a while, eyes tracing the dance of firelight against the trees. Then, without a word, she reached out toward him, fingers brushing the air in a silent request. Sirius watched her for a beat before passing her the flask. Their fingers met briefly again, warm skin against calloused, and he let her take it. "Your trial," he said after a pause, voice low and thoughtful, "happened to be the same morning as my mother's ceremonies." He gave a dry half-smile. "Some crime to be held before a glorious send-off." Izzi turned her head sharply and jabbed her elbow into his ribs. "You think I actually did it?" He grunted softly, rubbing his side but smirking all the same. "No," he said, looking her up and down. "But Valoran was never much for truth-seeking, were they?" Izzi's expression shifted, the sharpness fading to something softer, sadder. She looked away, her voice dropping to a murmur. "Changed everything for me." She lifted the flask then, taking a long, unrestrained swig, far more than a sip. Sirius didn't stop her. The rum burned down her throat, heavy and warm, and she coughed once before exhaling, cheeks already flushing pink in the firelight. He watched her with quiet amusement. "Easy," he said, not unkindly. "You'll drink yourself blind before the stars fade." Izzi lowered the flask, eyes unfocused but steady. "Maybe that wouldn't be so bad." Sirius gave a quiet hum, leaning back against the log again, his gaze turning upward toward the stars. "We can talk more about it next time," he said after a moment. "If you want to open old wounds." She turned to glance at him, his profile dark against the flickering light, calm but not distant. "But for now," he continued softly, "we should just enjoy the chill night while it lasts." Izzi nodded faintly, her expression easing. She tucked her legs under herself, sitting closer to the fire, her hair catching the glow like copper threads. Sirius reached forward, pulled another small branch onto the embers, and the flames flared quietly between them. Neither spoke again, the forest whispered around them, the fire crackling softly. Chapter 2. The Morning After. The world returned slowly, in fragments. Birds, the hiss of embers, the smell of damp earth and smoke. Then came a dull ache behind Izzi's eyes, throbbing with every heartbeat. Something nudged her side. Then again, a little harder. "You alive, Iz?" She cracked one eye open to see Kaelen's shadow blotting out the morning light. His arms were crossed, and his expression landed somewhere between amusement and impatience. "What?" she muttered, voice gravelly. "Happened to letting a lady sleep?" Kaelen snorted. "We've been trying to wake you for a while now. Everyone's ready to set out, except for you." Izzi groaned and rolled onto her back, throwing an arm across her face. The sun was merciless, its light stabbing through the trees straight into her skull. "Gods above," she mumbled. "Never again." Kaelen crouched down beside her bedroll, smirking. "You sure? Looked like you and Sirius were having a grand time last night. Thought you were keeping watch, not trying to pickle yourself." "Go away," she muttered into her blanket. He chuckled, giving her another gentle nudge with his boot. "Come on, lady. We've got a long road and no mercy for the hungover." Izzi sat up slowly, squinting at the brightness. Her hair was a tangled mess, her braid half undone and her eyes bleary. She muttered a few creative curses under her breath as she tried to fold her blanket. Priscilla stood nearby, already packed and ready, quietly adjusting the straps on her satchel. She watched Izzi with the faintest flicker of amusement before turning back to her task. Sirius was a little farther off, leaning against a tree, the early light catching the edge of his coat. He looked infuriatingly awake. When she caught his eye, he raised the flask slightly, not offering, just teasing. Izzi groaned again. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" His mouth twitched. "A little." Kaelen hefted his pack onto his shoulder, chuckling as Izzi tried to tie her hair back with unsteady fingers. "You're lucky I didn't let Priscilla try to wake you. You'd have been roasted alive by now." Izzi shot him a half-hearted glare. "Next time, let her." Kaelen just grinned. "Noted." By the time she finally stood, the others were already waiting at the edge of the clearing. Sirius gave a low whistle to signal readying up, and Kaelen offered Izzi a steadying hand as she slung her pack over her shoulder. The sun had climbed higher, the road waiting beyond the trees, bright, endless, and cruelly loud for her aching head. Izzi muttered something about never drinking with half-elves again and trudged after the others. The morning light was far too bright. It shimmered through the trees in golden beams, beautiful but cruel, every glint stabbing behind Izzi's eyes. The road ahead stretched long and dusty, the horizon hazy with heat. Each step sent a soft jolt through her skull, and her stomach churned in protest with every sway of her pack. Sirius walked up ahead beside Kaelen, the two moving in easy rhythm, their conversation carried off by the breeze. Priscilla lingered behind them, matching Izzi's sluggish pace. Izzi pressed a hand against her midsection, breathing through her nose and muttering to herself. The rum from the night before sloshed around inside her like a curse. She nearly stopped once, swallowing hard as the sour taste crept up her throat, but she managed to keep it down, barely. Beside her, Priscilla glanced over. After a few quiet moments, she reached out and poked Izzi lightly on the forehead. "You shouldn't develop a habit like Sirius," she said softly. Izzi squinted at her, one eye half closed against the sun. "I'm not," she grumbled, brushing her hand away. "Just regretting choices." Priscilla's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but she said nothing more. She simply adjusted her satchel and continued walking, her curls swaying gently behind her. Izzi sighed, holding her stomach with both hands as they followed the curve of the road. The wind carried the scent of pine and dust, too clean, too sharp, but she kept moving, determined not to let her hangover win. Somewhere ahead, Kaelen's laughter drifted back toward them, and Izzi groaned under her breath. Loud, so loud. Priscilla's quiet chuckle was the only reply. The two of them pressed on, the road bright and endless before them. "Pick up the pace, Iz." Kaelen's voice carried easily down the road ahead, his stride never slowing. Izzi groaned, tightening her cloak around her shoulders as if it might muffle the sound. "Curse that damned orc," she muttered under her breath. The road stretched on for hours, winding through gentle hills and patches of tall grass that swayed in the midday wind. The sun hung high, warm but not cruel, casting long shadows of the four travelers as they made their slow way along the worn dirt path. Farm fields began to appear, golden wheat rippling in the breeze, fenced by old, weathered posts. A few farmers worked in the distance, heads bent under wide straw hats. The faint scent of tilled soil and hay mixed with the crisp air, a sign that civilization was near. By the time the rooftops of a small farming town came into view, Izzi felt half dead but grateful. The road dipped into a valley where narrow lanes wound between cottages of timber and stone. their chimneys trailing lazy ribbons of smoke. Chickens clucked near the roadside, and the distant clatter of a blacksmith's hammer echoed faintly. Sirius was the first to speak, his tone as even as ever. "There's an inn here," he said, nodding toward the far end of the main road, where a faded sign hung above a 2-story building. "I stayed once before. Decent food, clean rooms." Kaelen eyed the sign, then the road leading past the town toward open fields. "We can make camp just outside the walls," he said. "No point wasting coin when the ground's free." Izzi groaned audibly, dragging a hand through her hair. "The ground doesn't come with a soft bed." She shot him a weary look. "Besides, I happen to know Elvina Royal who owes me from last night. He can pay." Kaelen blinked, confused. "Elvina what?" Before Izzi could answer, Sirius exhaled through his nose, the faintest hint of amusement breaking through. "I'll explain later." Kaelen frowned, clearly not satisfied, but before he could press, Priscilla's voice cut softly through the warm midday air. She tilted her head toward him, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Money, money," she said simply, the corner of her mouth curving upward. Kaelen looked at her, half glowering, half smiling. "You're all conspiring against me, aren't you?" Izzi smirked, pulling her cloak tighter as the first sounds of the market reached them, the chatter of vendors, the clatter of carts, the faint smell of baking bread. "Welcome to democracy," she said, stepping past him toward the town. Kaelen sighed, muttering something about freeloaders, but followed all the same. Sirius lingered a step behind, his gaze sweeping over the quiet streets ahead. The town wasn't much, just a cluster of cottages, a few market stalls, and an inn with paint peeling from its sign. But after days on the road, it looked like heaven. The group followed the worn cobblestone lane through the heart of the little town. The afternoon sun had settled comfortably overhead, glinting off metal signs and thatched roofs. The streets were lively in their own modest way. Merchants haggling, farmers unloading grain sacks, and a handful of children darting between carts. When they reached the inn, Sirius stepped forward and pulled a few silver coins from the inner pocket of his coat. He handed them to Kaelen without a word. "For room and board," he said simply. Kaelen looked from the money to him, still half scowling. "You sure?" Sirius nodded once. Kaelen snorted but didn't argue. He tucked the coins away and gave a nod. "Fair enough." Sirius turned to Izzi, who was eyeing a sign across the street with a painted mortar and pestle. "There's a healer here," he said. "You could use something for that headache before it gets worse." Izzi arched his brow. "You saying I look terrible?" He didn't answer, just started walking toward the healer's door. "Fine," she sighed, following after him. Kaelen turned toward Priscilla. "All right, you and me then." But before he could finish, Priscilla was already halfway across the street, her braid bouncing behind her as she hurried after Izzi and Sirius. Kaelen watched her go, exhaling through his nose. "Right. Of course." He shook his head, adjusting the strap of his pack before turning back to the inn. "Guess it's just me then." Inside, the air was warm with the scent of roasted meat and old ale. A handful of locals sat at rough tables, their conversation low. The innkeeper stood behind the counter, polishing a mug with practiced rhythm. She looked up as Kaelen stepped in and froze for the smallest fraction of a second. Her eyes widened, her hand stilling around the glass. He was hard to miss, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of presence that filled a room even when he tried not to. "Afternoon," she said after a heartbeat, her voice polite but tight. She forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Room for one?" Kaelen stopped near the counter, scratching at his jaw. "4, actually. My companions are getting supplies." "4," she repeated softly, glancing toward the door as if expecting to see them. "Of course. Not many travelers lately." She reached for the ledger, trying not to show how her fingers trembled slightly. "You'll want the big room upstairs. It's clean, 2 beds and plenty of floor space." Kaelen placed Sirius's coins on the counter. "That'll do." Her gaze flicked to the silver, then back to his face. The tension in her shoulders eased just a little. "I'll, fetch the key." As she turned, her hair, bright gold and curling softly down her back, caught the light from the hearth. Kaelen's eyes followed her without meaning to. When she turned back, their gazes met for just an instant. "Here," she said quickly, handing him the key. "End of the hall upstairs." "Thanks," Kaelen replied, his voice a little softer than before. She nodded, that forced smile returning, though now it held a trace of curiosity behind the nerves. "Enjoy your stay." Kaelen lingered a moment, watching her return to her work, before muttering under his breath, "Damn blondes every time." Kaelen lingered by the counter a moment too long, turning the room key over in his hand. The blonde innkeeper had gone back to stacking mugs, her shoulders still a little stiff from his presence. He cleared his throat quietly. "So," he started, trying for casual. "Been here long?" She blinked, surprised he was still there. "Me? Unless you're talking to yourself," Kaelen said, immediately regretting the joke. Her smile flickered, polite but strained. "All my life," she replied, her voice careful. "Family business." Kaelen nodded, shifting his weight awkwardly. "Nice place. Cozy. Thank you." She wiped the counter again, though it was already spotless. The silence stretched thin. Kaelen rubbed the back of his neck. "Name's Kaelen, by the way." "Ira?" she said after a pause. He smiled, relieved to have gotten at least that much. "Pretty name." She looked up at him, the faintest trace of a blush under her nerves, but quickly dropped her gaze. "Thank you," she murmured, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Kaelen hesitated, wanting to say something else, anything, but the words just wouldn't line up. "Right. Well. Thanks for the key." Ira nodded quickly. "Of course." He gave a half wave and turned toward the stairs, muttering under his breath. "Smooth, Kaelen. Real smooth." Upstairs, the hallway smelled faintly of pine soap and old wood. He pushed open the door to the end room, 2 beds, a window looking out over the fields, and just enough floor space for the bedrolls. He set his pack down, exhaling as he sank onto one of the mattresses. A few minutes later, the door creaked open again. Sirius stepped in first, followed by Izzi, who looked mildly more alive than she had earlier, and Priscilla, quietly carrying a small pouch from the healer's shop. Kaelen looked up, forcing a grin. "Well, you all look like you didn't just rob a poor orc of his piece." Izzi smirked faintly. "You talking to me, or him?" She nodded toward Sirius. "Both," Kaelen said. They filed inside, setting their packs down. The room grew quickly crowded with the sound of shuffling gear and creaking floorboards. Izzi flopped down on the nearest bed, groaning as her head hit the pillow. Kaelen hesitated a moment, glancing toward her. "Iz," he said. She opened one eye lazily. "Hmm?" He cleared his throat, rubbing the back of his neck again. "You think you could help me with something?" Her brow arched. "Depends. What is it?" Kaelen hesitated, the tips of his ears turning faintly red. "There's, the innkeeper. Ira. Thought maybe—" Izzi laughed weakly and threw an arm over her eyes. "In my sorry state?" she groaned. "Tomorrow, Kaelen. Tomorrow." He grinned despite himself. "Fair enough." Sirius leaned against the wall near the window, arms crossed, the faintest hint of amusement flickering across his face. Priscilla quietly settled near the foot of the second bed, her curls catching the dim lamplight as she began unpacking her satchel. The room filled with the comforting, familiar sounds of rest after travel, the creak of beds, the sigh of tired bodies, the muffled wind outside. Izzi didn't last long after they settled in. The healer's draught had done its job, whatever bitter concoction she'd been given hit her like a hammer. Within minutes she was sprawled sideways across the bed, boots still on, snoring softly against the pillow. Kaelen sat at the edge of the other bed, watching her for a moment before shaking his head. Lightweight. Sirius was seated by the window, the moonlight painting a faint silver edge along his hair. He'd taken the watch without being asked, eyes half on the street below, half lost in thought. Kaelen leaned back on his elbows, glancing toward him. "You still got that flask?" Sirius looked over, brow raised. "You planning to start now?" Kaelen shrugged. "I just want to know what had her reeling for half the morning." Sirius shook his head, reached into his coat and tossed the flask across the room. Kaelen caught it clumsily, pulled the stopper and sniffed. "Smells like paint thinner," he muttered, then took a sip. The moment the rum hit his tongue, his eyes widened. He swallowed hard, coughed once, and groaned. "Gods," he rasped, shoving the flask away like it had bitten him. "That's awful." Sirius gave a quiet, amused huff. "It's not that bad." Kaelen coughed again for good measure. "You're either lying or dead inside." Sirius smirked faintly, leaning back in his chair. The two sat in silence for a while, the only sound the faint crackle of the small hearth and Izzi's soft snoring. After a moment, Kaelen's gaze drifted toward the window, though his thoughts were clearly elsewhere. He drummed his fingers against his knee, hesitating before finally blurting, "So, Sirius, Kaelen scratched the back of his neck. "You ever been with anyone?" Sirius blinked, turning his head as if he wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. "What?" "You know," Kaelen said quickly, trying to sound casual but failing spectacularly. Anyone special? Someone waiting for you somewhere? Sirius, caught entirely off guard, shifted too fast and nearly toppled the chair. He caught himself at the last second, staring at Kaelen like he'd just spoken in another language. Well, that's pretty personal. Yeah, Kaelen said with a grin. That's why I asked. Across the room, a soft giggle escaped from Priscilla. She had been sitting quietly near her bedroll, knees drawn to her chest, watching them both with bright, curious eyes. She raised a hand quickly to cover her mouth, but the laughter still slipped through her fingers. Sirius shot her a sidelong look, not angry but faintly embarrassed. Kaelen smirked wider. Didn't think I'd ever see you thrown off balance, he said. Enjoy it while it lasts, Sirius replied dryly, turning his gaze back to the window. Priscilla's shoulders shook with another small laugh before she nestled down against her blanket, curls spilling across her arm. The room settled into a comfortable quiet again, a strange, easy sort of peace among the mismatched four. Kaelen leaned back against the wall, eyes half closed, still thinking about a certain blonde innkeeper and the way her hair had caught the light. The fire in the small hearth had burned low, throwing long, faint shadows across the room. The steady rhythm of Izzi's quiet breathing filled the silence, broken only by the occasional creak of wood as the inn settled for the night. Kaelen shifted on the edge of his bed, glancing toward Sirius, still seated by the window. The half-elf sat in his usual silence, eyes on the dark street below, the faint glint of the flask still in his hand. After a while, Kaelen cleared his throat. So, he said quietly, anyone hiding away anywhere? Sirius's head turned just slightly, the lamplight catching the sharp line of his cheekbone. What? You heard me, Kaelen said, keeping his tone easy, almost teasing. Hard to believe you've lived this long and never had your sights on anyone. For a heartbeat, Sirius said nothing, only stared back at him, his expression unreadable. Then, from the corner of the room, a soft voice broke the quiet. Elise. Both men turned. Priscilla sat curled near her blanket, her knees hugged close, her curls spilling across her face. Her tone was barely above a whisper, but the name hung in the air like a bell. Kaelen blinked, then a slow grin crept across his face. Oh, there is someone. He leaned back, smirking to himself. Guess Izzy's got some competition, he thought. But the look on Sirius's face wiped the grin from his lips. The half-elf's eyes had gone hard, a cold, furious glint that Kaelen hadn't seen before. Prisk, Sirius said sharply, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. Priscilla's shoulders shrank at once. She looked down at her hands, the smile gone from her face. Sorry, she murmured, almost too quietly to hear. Kaelen held up his hands slightly. Hey, easy. I didn't mean anything by it. Nothing wrong with having feelings. Or memories. Sirius closed his eyes, exhaling through his nose. One hand came up to his forehead, bandaged fingers pressing against his temple. Just old memories, he muttered. Kaelen hesitated, then asked softly. Didn't work out, huh? Priscilla looked up then, her eyes soft, her voice breaking as she whispered, Dead. The word hit like a stone dropped into still water. Kaelen's eyes widened. He turned to Sirius, who sat completely still now, staring out the window into the night. The usual stoicism in his face had hardened into something else, not anger, but the kind of quiet ache that came from remembering too much. Kaelen swallowed, guilt washing over him. I'm sorry, Sirius, he said quietly. He stood, crossing the few steps between them, and laid a heavy hand on his shoulder. Sirius didn't look up. His gaze stayed fixed on the street outside, the torchlight catching the faint emotion on his face. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kaelen gave his shoulder a small squeeze and stepped away. Get some rest, friend. He moved toward the bed where Izzi lay sprawled in peaceful oblivion and sat down heavily, pulling off his boots. Good night, Priscilla, he said softly. She nodded from her corner. Good night. The half-elf didn't answer, only tilted his head slightly in acknowledgement, his eyes still lost somewhere beyond the glass. Kaelen settled onto the mattress, staring up at the wooden beams overhead as the quiet returned. The room seemed to exhale with him, settling back into the rhythm of sleep and distant memory. Outside, the wind stirred softly through the streets, carrying away what was left of the night. Kaelen's breathing slowed first. Within minutes, the orc was out cold, one arm draped across his chest, his snores deep but steady. Izzi shifted once in her sleep, mumbling something incoherent before going still again. The only light came from the dying embers in the hearth, a faint orange glow that flickered across the walls, casting long shadows. Sirius hadn't moved. He still sat by the window, elbow propped on the sill, his hand covering his eyes. The night outside was utterly still. No wind, no sound but the faint hum of insects beyond the glass. Soft footsteps padded across the floorboards. Priscilla stopped beside him, the hem of her cloak brushing the edge of his chair. For a long moment she just stood there, her hands clasped in front of her, unsure how to begin. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." Sirius let out a quiet breath, his voice barely audible. "Why, Prisk?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she knelt down and wrapped her arms around him, slow, tentative, but firm enough that he couldn't ignore the warmth. He stiffened at first, startled by the sudden contact, but didn't pull away. "I miss her too," Priscilla said softly, her voice trembling at the edges. "She's been gone too long." Sirius exhaled shakily, lowering his hand to his lap. His jaw tightened, eyes glinting faintly in the dim light. "Prisk," he murmured, but the rest of the words caught in his throat. For a while, they stayed that way, just two figures framed by the soft glow of dying firelight, the silence between them full of old ghosts. After a moment, Priscilla looked over her shoulder. Kaelen and Izzi were fast asleep, the orc sprawled sideways across the bed, the elf half-curled in her blanket. A small smile tugged at her lips, tired but genuine. Sirius followed her gaze, and the faintest flicker of emotion crossed his face, a mix of affection and ache. He rubbed his forehead, eyes closing for a beat. "Fuck," he whispered under his breath. Priscilla just leaned her head against his shoulder, saying nothing more. The fire crackled once, then faded to quiet embers. "Maybe," she thought, her gaze wandering toward the sleeping pair. "Maybe we can fill the hole with new people, and new memories." Her eyes lingered on the orc and the elf, Kaelen's heavy hand resting near his sword even in sleep. Izzi curled loosely under her blanket, a faint line of drool at the corner of her mouth. The faintest smile tugged at Priscilla's lips, both fond and sad. "They're not her, but maybe they don't have to be." Sirius sat there, only let out a slow exhale, his hand tightening once around hers before letting go. Priscilla glanced at him one last time, then back to the others. The corners of her eyes glimmered faintly in the dying light. "Maybe this time," she said, "we don't have to lose everyone." Sirius rubbed his eyes, weary, but didn't respond. The only answer was the crackle of the last ember collapsing into ash. Priscilla leaned her head back against the wall, still watching the two of them. "Good night," she whispered quietly, though whether to them or to the memory of someone else, even she wasn't sure. The room fell still again, save for the rhythm of sleeping breaths and the faint hum of dawn rising beyond the window. Chapter 3. Little Rabbit's Lesson. The herbs took hold slowly. Her breathing slowed, her muscles loosened, and the world around her faded. She dreamed she was falling, air rushing past her ears, the light above shrinking to nothing. Then came the plunge. Cold water swallowed her whole. She sank deeper, hair floating like smoke, lungs burning until her body convulsed. Her breath hitched, and she woke in silk. Heat clung to her skin, the air thick with perfume and candlelight. The sheets tangled around her, soft and slick, and her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. She jolted upward from the shock of the nightmare sheets peeling off her, revealing herself. From beside her came a quiet voice, smooth as still water. "Again, little rabbit?" Izzi turned, breath trembling. Celine lay half-turned toward her, dark hair spilling across the pillow and down her bare chest. The candlelight caught in her eyes, green and gold all at once. A faint, knowing smile curved her lips. "Same nightmare?" Izzi nodded once, silent, clutching the sheets, raising them to her chest. Celine's smile deepened just slightly. "Come." Izzi hesitated, then obeyed. She let the sheets slip from her hands and moved closer until her head rested against Celine's chest. The other woman's skin was warm beneath her cheek, her heartbeat steady. "That's better," Celine murmured, her fingers sliding through Izzi's hair. Celine's expression was unreadable, calm, maybe even tender, but distant in a way that made the warmth feel dangerous. "You dream because you think too much," she said. "You should stop that." Izzi said nothing. She didn't know what to say. The rhythm of Celine's breathing steadied her, slow, controlled, sure of itself. After a while, Celine traced a fingertip along Izzi's jaw, then down the curve of her arm, following the faint marks of old scars. Her voice was quiet, thoughtful. "I try. You never try hard enough." Celine shifted, her fingers brushing a damp strand of hair from Izzi's face. "You're burning," she said. Was I that cruel to you last night? Izzy's lips parted. To deny, to explain, she wasn't sure, but Celine's touch traced down her jaw and silenced her. "Breathe, my little rabbit," she whispered. "You're safe now." Izzy nodded once, slow, obedient. Her heartbeat began to steady beneath Celine's hand. Outside, rain tapped against the glass, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat beneath layers of silk. For a moment, there was only the sound of breathing. Then Celine spoke again, voice low and deliberate. "Dreams are funny things," she said. "They always bring us back to where we started." Izzy blinked, frowning slightly. "What do you mean?" Celine smiled, small, secretive. "It means there's still something you're running from." Izzy lifted her gaze slightly, meeting her eyes. "Then what should I do?" Celine smiled faintly. "Stay close." Izzy nodded, small and quiet, her head sinking back against Celine's chest. Only the rain whispered against the glass, the steady beat of it blurring the edges of thought. Izzy's breathing slowed, matching the rhythm. The warmth between them dulled the ache in her muscles, though she could still feel it. A deep soreness in her limbs, the faint sting where nails had raked across her skin. Celine's fingers traced slow, deliberate lines along her arm. The touch was light, barely there, following the curve of her shoulder before drifting down to her side. Each pass left gooseflesh in its wake. Izzy closed her eyes, listening to Celine's heartbeat beneath her ear, even, unhurried, certain. For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was breath and rain. Then Celine's hand stilled against her hip. "Little rabbit," she said softly. Izzy's eyes opened, though she didn't lift her head. "Hmm?" Celine's thumb moved in a slow circle, pressing lightly into the skin just above her hip bone. "We've been asked to do something." Izzy's brow furrowed faintly. "Another job?" Celine's tone stayed calm, almost affectionate. "Of course." Izzy hesitated. "You already accepted it?" "I did." Celine's hand drifted higher, resting at the small of Izzy's back. "The pay is good, but, more importantly, the client will be useful to have under our thumb." Izzy's pulse quickened, though her voice stayed steady. "What's the job?" Celine's eyes lingered on the ceiling a moment before she answered. "A runaway, someone who took something that doesn't belong to her." Her fingers continued their idle movement up along Izzy's spine, following the faint trails her nails had left the night before. "She's clever, but shouldn't be hard to find." Izzy shifted slightly, the sheets whispering against her skin. "They want her brought back?" Celine's lips curved into a faint smile. "Dealt with." Izzy went quiet. Celine's voice softened, patient. "She knows things she shouldn't. If she reaches the border alive, it could cause difficulties." Izzy exhaled slowly. "I'll find her." "Yes," Celine confirmed. "You make certain she won't be a problem." Her fingers stopped their tracing, resting at the center of Izzy's back. "Do you understand?" Izzy nodded once, her face half hidden against Celine's chest. "Yes." "Good," Celine murmured, brushing her lips against Izzy's hair. "You never disappoint me." The rain outside quickened, a soft drumbeat against the glass. Celine's hand slipped from her back and found her chin, tilting her face upward until their eyes met. "You'll leave tonight," she said. "Before the moon sets." Izzy swallowed, the words sinking deep, commands dressed as care. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'll go." Celine smiled, small, proud, and almost tender. "That's my little rabbit." With a firm grip on Izzy's chin, she pulls her into a kiss. Izzy melted into the kiss, surrendering to Celine's. She sighs softly as Celine shifts her weight, positioning herself on top of the elf, gently pinning Izzy's wrists to the bed. Celine slowly sat upward, exposing herself to the elf. "But first," Celine whispered, her voice laced with anticipation. "Let's continue, yes?" The room filled with soft gasps and moans. The room was dim again when Izzy rose. The candles had burned low, their wax running down the bronze holders in soft rivers. The scent of smoke and rose oil lingered heavily in the air. She moved quietly, the sheets sliding from her skin as she stood. Her muscles ached, though she didn't think about it. She dressed piece by piece, linen, leather, the familiar weight of her daggers finding their place at her hips. Behind her, Celine stirred, still half wrapped in the silk. One arm rested lazily across the sheets, her dark hair falling loose over her shoulder. She didn't speak at first, she only watched, her eyes following Izzy's movements the way one might watch a blade being drawn. Admiring, possessive, certain it belonged to her. When Izzy fastened her cloak, Celine finally reached to the side table and picked up a folded parchment. "Here," she said. Izzy stepped forward. Their fingers brushed as she took it, feeling the heat of Celine's touch linger even after the paper was gone. She was last seen near the old border ruins, Celine said, her tone soft but deliberate. There's mist there this time of year. Easy to lose your way. I won't, Izzi replied. Celine smiled faintly, though her eyes never softened. I'll meet you soon. There's another matter I must attend first. Izzi nodded once, of course. She hesitated then, standing over the bed. Celine looked up at her through half-lidded eyes, the candlelight drawing sharp gold lines across her face. Izzi leaned down and pressed her lips to hers, a quiet kiss, more instinct than choice. Farewell, Izzi whispered. Until I call, Celine answered. Izzi turned, pulling her hood over her hair, and left without another word. The air outside was cool and damp. Mist rolled low through the trees as she crossed the courtyard, boots silent on the slick stone. The world beyond Celine's chambers felt pale and distant, like a dream thinning at the edges. Hours passed in silence as she followed the trail northward. The forest grew thicker, branches heavy with moss. Somewhere in the distance, a stream murmured through the dark. By dusk, she found it, the ruins. What had once been a Valoran outpost lay half-buried beneath roots and vines. Towers reduced to stone husks, banners long rotted away. The air was cold and wet, heavy with the smell of earth. Izzi crouched near a broken archway, brushing her fingers across the ground. Mud, faint prints, a trace of ash. Someone had passed through recently. She rose slowly, hand resting on the hilt of her dagger, eyes narrowing as the mist began to shift between the trees. There, movement. Small, fast. Izzi took a breath, steady and cold, and stepped into the fog. The ruins were silent except for the soft drip of rain from the broken arches above. Izzi moved through the fog like a shadow, her steps soundless against the wet stone. A rustle to her left snapped her attention around, dagger drawn, stance low. She froze, breath held. A pair of eyes glinted back from the undergrowth. A fox, its fur matted from rain. It blinked once, unbothered, then slipped back into the mist. Izzi let out the air slowly through her nose, blade still raised. The tension didn't fade, it simply changed direction. The hunt had begun. She moved deeper into the ruins, senses sharpening with each step. Her ears caught the faint drag of movement over stone, the soft scrape of a boot somewhere ahead. Her eyes traced every broken edge, every disturbance in the moss. A trail of footprints, light, careful, recent, led up the cracked steps of an old watchtower. Izzi followed. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She moved. Her heartbeat slowed instead of quickening, her breath steady. The world narrowed to scent and sound, the rustle of her cloak, the soft whistle of wind through hollow stone. She was no longer the woman in Celine's bed, or the exile with something to prove. She was the knife itself. A shadow flickered above her. Too late. The figure dropped from the upper wall, blade flashing through the mist. Izzi twisted, but not fast enough. The dagger's edge caught her cheek, slicing from the corner of her mouth to her jaw. She hissed and stumbled back, one hand flying to the cut. Warm blood trickled over her fingers. The attacker landed in a crouch before her, a small frame, hood drawn tight, breath ragged. Then the figure turned and ran. Izzi straightened slowly, the shock already fading to calm. Her expression didn't change. She wiped the blood from her face with the back of her hand, then started after her prey. The ruins swallowed them both. Her boots splashed through shallow puddles, the sound quick and measured. The girl ahead moved fast, darting through collapsed doorways and over fallen beams, but her steps were too loud, too panicked. Izzi's were not. She followed the scent of fear like a trail, each mistake narrowing the distance. When the chase ended, it was in what had once been a great hall, now half collapsed, vines strangling the pillars. The girl was there, pressed against a cracked wall, dagger trembling in her grip. Izzi stepped into the open, her hood slipping back. The cut along her mouth gleamed wet in the dim light. Neither spoke. Izzi's eyes were hollow, unblinking. The part of her that could hesitate had gone quiet. The girl's breath came in short bursts, her hood shifting just enough for Izzi to see the edge of her face. Young, frightened, familiar. Izzi advanced one slow step. The girl flinched, blade shaking. Izzi's voice, when it came, was low and even. Don't run, it won't change how this ends. The girl didn't move. Izzi drew her second dagger, the metal whispering free of its sheath. The fog swirled between them, hiding everything except their eyes. The girl didn't run. She straightened instead, dagger raised in a trembling grip, her stance unsteady but defiant. Izzi studied her, a small frame, rain-soaked cloak clinging to her body, leather armor cut for speed rather than protection. Mud streaked her boots. Her breathing came fast, sharp enough to echo off the stone. The hood shadowed most of her face, but a few locks of hair, pale, streaked with ash, clung wetly to her cheek. Izzi tilted her head, assessing. She could see every weakness, the uneven footing, the weight held too far back, the slight shake in the girl's arm. A child trying to be a fighter. "Don't," the girl whispered. Her voice was young, rough with fear. "You don't have to." Izzi moved. The first strike came like lightning, her dagger flashing out, forcing the girl to block on instinct. Metal clashed, the impact jarring up Izzi's arm. The girl stumbled but didn't fall. A second strike followed, low, swift, precise. The girl barely parried, her wrist twisting painfully. Izzi circled, silent and relentless, her expression cold. The next blow landed. The edge of Izzi's blade sliced across the girl's shoulder, tearing through cloth and skin. The girl cried out, staggering back. Izzi pressed forward. Another cut, shallow, deliberate. Then another. She wasn't killing her, not yet. She was playing with her. The girl swung wildly, her dagger catching nothing but air. Izzi caught her wrist, twisted, and drove her knee into the girl's side. The younger elf crumpled to one knee, gasping. "Stop," she pleaded. "Please." Izzi's dagger came up under her chin, lifting her head just enough for their eyes to meet through the hood's shadow. For a moment, Izzi saw nothing but fear, and then something worse. Recognition. The same wide, gray eyes, the same sharp features softened by youth. Rain dripped from the hood's edge as it fell back. The girl's hair, streaked chestnut and copper, caught the faint light. Her lips trembled, blood staining her teeth. Izzi froze. She was looking at herself. Younger, weaker, terrified. The dagger trembled in her hand. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, each pulse whispering Celine's voice. "Do it. Finish it." Izzi's breath caught. The girl's eyes met hers, pleading, mirrored, alive. And for the first time in years, Izzi hesitated. The dagger trembled in Izzi's grip, the blade catching a streak of light through the fog. The younger elf pressed herself back against the wall, eyes wide, lips trembling. Rain slid down her cheek, mixing with the thin line of blood from the cut at her collarbone. Then, "Good," came a voice, low and familiar, smooth as oil. "You've already found her, little rabbit." Izzi's head snapped toward the sound. Celine stood at the edge of the ruined archway, the mist curling around her like a cloak. She didn't approach. She didn't need to. Her gaze was enough to fill the space between them. The moment stretched thin. Izzi's breath came fast, fogging the air in shallow bursts. She turned back to the girl, the hood fully fallen now. Her face was young, no more than 19 summers. Freckles scattered faintly across her nose, a split lip, pale skin slick with rain. Her eyes, wide, frightened, gray, mirrored Izzi's own. The same tilt of the chin, the same streak of copper through brown hair. The dagger hovered inches from her throat. "Please," the girl whispered, voice breaking. "Don't." Celine's footsteps were slow, deliberate, echoing softly off the broken stone. She stopped a fair distance away, arms folded loosely before her. "Well," she asked, her tone light, almost conversational. "What are you waiting for?" Izzi didn't answer. Her pulse hammered against her ribs, each heartbeat louder than the last. The scent of rain and iron filled her lungs. Her thoughts came in flashes, her trial, the jeering crowd, the brand of exile seared into her arm. Celine's hand pulling her from the dirt. The whispered promises, the commands dressed as kindness. She tried to steady her breathing, but the air felt thick. Celine's voice softened, cutting through the storm inside her. "Izzi." Just her name, gentle, patient, final. Izzi flinched as though struck. Her grip tightened on the dagger. The girl's eyes widened, one last small shake of her head. Then the blade flashed. The sound was brief as Izzi's blade cut into her throat. A gasp, the weight of a body falling to wet stone. Izzi stood motionless, rain dripping from her hood, her dagger slick and red. Celine watched from the mist, her expression unreadable, neither approval nor pity, just quiet satisfaction. The wind shifted, the fog began to swallow the scene. Izzi's hand trembled once, then stilled. She looked down at the lifeless face, the reflection of herself, and felt nothing at all. Izzi stood over the body for a long time. Rain gathered in the hollow of the dead girl's throat, the water streaking pink as it mixed with blood. Freckles dotted her cheeks, a constellation across pale skin. Her mouth hung open slightly, the faintest shape of a word that would never finish. Izzi didn't move. She simply stared, taking in every detail. The small hands, the frayed leather of her tunic, the way the eyes, those gray eyes had already begun to cloud. Footsteps echoed softly through the mist. Celine's shadow stretched across the stone before her, long and dark. "Well done," she said quietly. Izzi blinked, as if waking. The world came rushing back, the cold, the smell of iron, the ache in her chest. She barely registered Celine's approach until the other woman was close enough to touch her. Celine reached out and took Izzi's chin between her fingers, lifting her face until their eyes met. For a moment she only looked, searching, studying the emptiness behind Izzi's stare. "There now," Celine whispered, her thumb brushing the edge of the cut along Izzi's mouth. "That's who you are. Don't look away." Izzi's lips parted, but no words came. Celine leaned closer, her voice quiet, soothing, each syllable deliberate. "You did what needed to be done. No emotion, no mercy." Her hand slid to Izzi's cheek, thumb tracing the faint smear of blood there. "Don't trouble yourself with guilt, my love. Some of us are made for gentleness. Others—" Her smile was small, approving. "For this." Izzi's breath shuddered. She looked like you?" Celine finished softly. "Perhaps that's why it had to be her, a reminder of what you've outgrown." Celine's fingers threaded into Izzi's hair, drawing her forehead against her own. "You are mine, little rabbit," she murmured, "and I will always love you for the way you are." The words sank into Izzi like a weight. The sound of rain swallowed the rest of the world until there was only the warmth of Celine's touch and the cold body at her feet. Celine smiled once more, a faint curve of satisfaction, and whispered, "Now, come, leave her. The past has no use for you anymore." Izzi obeyed. She stepped away from the corpse, the fog closing over the girl's face, erasing her from sight. Celine's touch lingered a moment longer before she turned away. She walked to the body, crouching gracefully beside it. The girl's pack lay half buried in the mud, a few scattered trinkets spilling from its open flap, a rune shard, a folded scrap of parchment, a charm of worn silver. Celine brushed away the dirt with delicate fingers, examining each piece with idle curiosity before slipping the pack's strap over her shoulder. Izzi said nothing. Her dagger hung limp in her hand, rain dripping from its edge. Celine straightened, her silhouette a dark curve against the mist. She glanced once toward Izzi, a faint smile touching her lips. "Let's be off, little rabbit." The words echoed, low and smooth, rippling through the fog, and Izzi gasped awake. She sat upright in the bed, chest heaving, the dim light of morning bleeding through the window shutters. Her skin was clammy with sweat. The room around her was still. Kaelen's steady breathing, Priscilla curled beside the hearth, Sirius seated near the window, calm as always. For a moment she didn't move. She just stared at her hands, flexing them, half expecting to see blood. Her heart wouldn't slow. The last whisper of Celine's voice lingered in her mind, coiled like smoke. "Little rabbit." Izzi pressed her palms to her eyes and drew a long, unsteady breath. The scent of damp wood and ash filled her nose, grounding her in the present, but the weight of that memory hadn't left her. "Feel better?" Izzi blinked, dragging herself back to the moment. Sirius was watching her from his chair near the window, a faint hint of amusement in his tired eyes. The dagger he'd been sharpening rested across his knee, the morning light glinting off the blade. She hesitated, then laughed, a soft, weary sound that pushed some of the tension from her shoulders. "Much," she said, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. The herbs really had done their work. Her body felt light again, her head clear. If only the same could be said for her dreams. She glanced around the room. Priscilla was still asleep near the hearth, wrapped snugly in her blanket. Kaelen had managed to sprawl across nearly the entire bed, one arm hanging over the edge, a faint snore rumbling from his chest. Izzi grinned despite herself and stood, padding over to him. She gave the orc a few solid pats on the shoulder. "You'd think you were guarding the bed from invaders." He didn't stir. Sirius just stared. Izzi began to stretch, her arms reaching overhead until her joints gave a satisfying pop, moaning quietly so as to not wake anyone. "If you want," Sirius offered, nodding toward the second bed. "You can take that one. He's claimed the first for himself." Izzi smirked, tilting her head. "Oh," she said playfully. "You mean sleep in the same bed together?" Sirius blinked, missing the jest entirely. "No need," he said, standing. "I'll take the chair." Izzi's smirk faded into a small sigh of defeat. "Right, the chair." He gave her a brief nod and settled his gaze back toward the window. Izzi crawled into the empty bed, the sheets cool against her skin. She turned onto her side, eyes drifting toward the same window Sirius watched, the soft morning haze filtering through the glass, painting pale gold across the floor. Her eyelids grew heavy again. The memory's weight was still there, but fainter now, washed clean by the quiet, by the faint rhythm of Sirius's steady breathing. Chapter 4. Rain and Rumors. The sound of rain filled the room before Izzi even opened her eyes. A soft, steady drumming against the shutters, the kind that swallowed every other noise and made the world feel smaller, gentler. Something nudged her shoulder. "Come on, Iz," a voice said, deep and half laughing. "You've been asleep half the day." Izzi groaned, rolling over and pulling the blanket higher over her head. "If the gods wanted me up, they wouldn't have made rain," Kaelen chuckled. "Fair, but I'm bored out of my mind. Sirius and Priscilla went to run errands, food, supplies, that sort of thing. He said he needed to restock the herbs that fixed your hangover." Izzi peeked out from under the blanket, one eye open. "Gods bless that man," she muttered. Kaelen grinned. "They'll be gone a while. The markets are a mess in this weather." She finally sat up, rubbing her eyes. The light in the room was dim, the windows streaked with water, the air cool and damp. Her hair was a tangle, her tunic twisted halfway around her torso. "So," she said, voice still scratchy, "no travel today?" Kaelen shook his head. "Not unless you want to swim to the next town. Roads are flooded." Izzi flopped back against the pillow. "Good. I needed a day to do absolutely nothing." There was a pause, long enough for her to notice Kaelen hadn't left. He was standing awkwardly near the foot of her bed, arms crossed, shifting his weight like he was working up to something. "So, he started. "Is." That tone made her lift her head again. "Oh no," she said immediately. "Whatever this is, it sounds like a favor." He gave a sheepish grin, tusks showing just slightly. A small one. Izzi narrowed her eyes. "Kaelen." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You remember last night? You said you'd help me." Izzi blinked, still foggy. "Help you with what?" "The blonde," he said, as if that explained everything. "Downstairs. The innkeeper." It took her a second, then it clicked. She burst out laughing, pressing a hand to her forehead. "Oh, that blonde." Kaelen looked mildly offended. "Her name's Aira." Right, Aira." Izzi smirked, swinging her legs off the bed. "You learn anything about her besides her name?" He hesitated. She, smells nice?" Izzi agape. "That's a start. Not a strong start, but a start." Kaelen groaned. "You know, I'm not good at this." "I've noticed," Izzi said, standing and stretching. She walked to the window, watching the sheets of rain cascading down the glass. "All right, big guy, give me a minute to wake up and we'll hatch a plan." Kaelen brightened instantly. "Really?" "Of course," she said, a sly grin forming. "If we're stuck here till the weather clears, we might as well make good use of the time. Besides," she turned toward him, eyebrow raised, "I could use some entertainment." Kaelen groaned again but couldn't help smiling. "This won't end terribly, will it?" Izzi grinned wider. "Probably." Izzi ran her fingers through her hair, trying to tame it into something resembling order. "All right, we're going downstairs," she said, straightening her tunic. "Food might help me think." Kaelen raised a brow. "Best ideas don't come on an empty stomach," Izzi said, already reaching for her cloak. "Besides, we'll get to see Aira again. Maybe inspiration will strike." Kaelen grumbled but followed her down the creaking steps. The main room of the inn was warm despite the damp. The hearth burned low, the smoke coiling lazily upward, and the scent of wet earth drifted in through the cracked windows. Outside, the rain hammered against the roof in relentless rhythm, turning the cobbled street beyond the door into a river of silver. Aira was behind the counter when they entered, sleeves rolled up, blonde curls tied back. She looked up at the sound of boots on the stairs, her face lighting with the polite smile reserved for guests. "Morning," she said, "or what's left of it." "Will you be eating?" "Absolutely," Izzi replied, stepping forward before Kaelen could speak. "You look like you've been working since dawn. Busy day?" Aira shook her head lightly, returning the smile though her eyes flicked, just briefly, to Kaelen. "Not really, just the storm keeping everyone in." "Then I hope you've saved the best for us," Izzi said warmly, hands clasped behind her back. "What's on the menu?" Aira gave a tired laugh. "Bread, stew, and eggs." "Perfect," Izzi said brightly. "Two of whatever's hot then." As they settled at a table near the window, Kaelen leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You're terrifying when you're nice." "That's how it works," Izzi murmured, smirking. "Charm first, strategy later." The rain outside softened to a steady drizzle, and the two fell into easy conversation while they waited. Kaelen absently traced a finger along the scarred tabletop while Izzi watched the street, eyes half-focused, thoughts turning behind her smile. When the food arrived, the illusion of comfort shattered. The bread was half-stale, the eggs rubbery and gray at the edges, and the stew, whatever it once was, smelled faintly of smoke and salt. Kaelen stared at the bowl in front of him. What did this poor thing do to deserve such a death? Izzi stifled a laugh. Be grateful, it's not still alive. He prodded the stew with his spoon. You think she cooked this? Perhaps, Izzi said, lowering her voice with a grin. Which means there's still a chance to save her reputation. Kaelen arched a brow. Izzi's grin widened. Kaelen, she whispered, leaning closer. This is it. Your way in. He blinked. What? You're good in the kitchen, she said, tapping her spoon against his bowl. You can actually make food worth eating. Offer to help her out, show her a few things. Call it a kindness. Maybe even draw in some customers if word gets out the food isn't poison anymore. Kaelen looked doubtful. You think? Not unless someone introduces the idea gracefully, Izzi said, smiling smugly. He groaned. Meaning you. Meaning me. Kaelen rubbed his temples. Izzi, the last time you said trust me, we ended up fleeing a town guard with a mule full of stolen cheese. Still though, Izzi smirked. And yet, here you are, still trusting me. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. All right. But if this goes wrong, I'll tell everyone you're shy, not stupid, she said sweetly. He gave her a look that was half glare, half grin. You enjoy this too much. Immensely. Izzi leaned back, crossing her arms as she eyed Era from across the room. The innkeeper was busy wiping down a counter, curls bouncing with every motion, her focus elsewhere. All right, Izzi murmured, more to herself than to Kaelen. Let's see if we can't cook up a little luck for you. Izzi pushed her chair back with a scrape and stood, smoothing out her tunic. All right, stay here and try not to look like a bear waiting for feeding time, she told Kaelen, flashing him a grin. But she was already walking away. Her stride had an easy rhythm to it, confident but light. Even half tired from the morning, Izzi carried herself like someone who owned every room she stepped into. Her steps were almost musical against the floorboards, soft but certain, and the way she moved her hands when she spoke always drew eyes before her words even landed. Era was behind the counter again, sorting a few mugs and trying to coax life back into a dull fire beneath a kettle. Izzi's shadow fell across the bar just as the woman looked up. Oh, hello again, Era said, brushing a stray curl from her face. Was the food all right? Izzi smiled, the kind that managed to look both forgiving and conspiratorial. Well, she said, lowering her voice just a touch. If I say yes, I'd be lying. But I'm told honesty is a virtue, so I'll say it had potential. Era winced, half laughing, clearly embarrassed. I'm so sorry. I'm not much of a cook myself, and the ones I've hired, well, most of them came from the fields, not the kitchens. It's hard to find anyone who knows what they're doing around here. Izzi leaned an elbow on the counter, her tone softening. Sounds like you've been juggling more than your fair share. Trying, Era said with a sigh. Half the time, I'm just hoping no one gets sick. Izzi chuckled lightly, then straightened, the spark of an idea brightening her eyes. Well, as luck would have it, I might have a solution for you. Era tilted her head. Oh? My companion, Izzi said, motioning toward the table where Kaelen sat pretending not to eavesdrop, is an exceptional cook, truly. I've traveled with him for years and I still haven't found anyone who can come close. He could teach you and your kitchen hands a few things. Make the most of what's here. Era blinked, surprise flickering across her features. You'd offer that? I mean, I couldn't ask. You don't have to ask, Izzi said brightly. We're all stuck here till the storm passes anyway. He'd love to show you and anyone else in the back a thing or two. As if on cue, heavy footsteps approached behind her. Kaelen cleared his throat. Izzi. Era's gaze darted past Izzi and her breath hitched slightly when she saw him up close. The orc was taller than anyone else in the room, his frame broad enough to fill the narrow space between tables. His expression was calm, though the faint curve of a tusked smile softened him. You cook? Era asked, disbelief mixing with curiosity. Kaelen gave a short nod, folding his arms. As it so happens. Izzi shot him a look that was equal parts play along and don't ruin this. Era hesitated, her fingers drumming nervously on the counter. That's unexpected. Kaelen smiled slightly. For a moment, silence. Then Era laughed, quiet and genuine, the tension easing from her shoulders. All right, she said. If you're offering, I'd be glad for the help. Gods know we need it. Izzi clasped her hands together in triumph. Wonderful, whispering to Kaelen. See, Kaelen? Easy. He shot her a sideways glance that said nothing about this was going to be easy. Aira turned toward the kitchen door. Come on then, both of you. Let's see what kind of magic you can work. As she disappeared into the back, Izzi smirked and whispered under her breath again. You're welcome. Kaelen couldn't help the faint grin tugging at his mouth as he followed after her. Aira pushed open the swinging door that led into the back, and a wave of warmth rolled out to meet them. The inn's kitchen was small and cluttered but alive, full of half-prepared ingredients, baskets of root vegetables, and the sharp scent of smoke from the hearth. Iron pots hung unevenly from hooks overhead, a few clanking gently as the door shut behind them. We don't have much, Aira said, gesturing toward a rough wooden table covered in produce. Most of what we use comes from the farms nearby. Potatoes, carrots, onions, herbs when we can get them. Sometimes the traders bring flour or salt pork if we're lucky. Kaelen stepped forward, scanning everything in silence. The rain tapping against the window filled the pause. He knelt to inspect a crate of vegetables, brushing off dirt, checking firmness with his thumb. Not bad, he murmured. Fresh enough. Aira smiled faintly, though a touch of nervousness lingered in her voice. We try to keep things stocked, but without a proper cook it's been, well, hit and miss. From the far corner came the sound of a wooden spoon clattering against a pot. An older woman turned, wiping her hands on her apron. Her hair was silver, pulled back into a neat braid, her face lined but kind. Grandmother, Aira said, crossing over to her. This is Kaelen and Izzi. They're travelers, he's here to help. The old woman gave a soft hum of acknowledgement, her cloudy eyes assessing the orc with curiosity. An orc who cooks, she said, her tone dry but amused. I've seen stranger things. Izzi stifled a laugh. Oh, you'll like him, she said brightly. He takes his craft seriously. If anything burns, it's on purpose. Kaelen ignored her, still studying the room. He glanced from the hearth to the shelves, noting the chipped jars of spices and the single dull knife resting beside a cutting board. His mind was already at work, mapping out what could be done, what couldn't, what could be improved without waste. You've got good basics, he said, finally. You just need a system, a bit of prep, better heat control, and sharper tools. Aira nodded, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. It's just me and Gran most days. If we can get things running smoother, it might help train whoever we hire next. Izzi, already leaning against the doorway, grinned. See? You're already sounding like a kitchen master. Kaelen gave her a look. A quiet master. She held up her hands innocently. I'll stay out of your way then. Izzi found an empty chair near the wall and dropped into it, crossing one leg over the other. I'll just sit here supervising, in case you need rescuing. Kaelen rolled up his sleeves, muttering under his breath. Aira chuckled, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. I appreciate this, really. If you can show us a few things, it'll help more than you know. Kaelen nodded, already scanning the countertop again, pulling ingredients closer. All right, he said simply. Let's see what we can make of it. The rain outside drummed steady and low as he got to work, the smell of smoke and earth mixing with the sharp, fresh scent of herbs. Izzi leaned back in her chair, watching the scene unfold, the old woman settling quietly by the hearth, Aira hovering near Kaelen with curiosity, and the orc himself moving with that rare focus she always admired. Maybe, she thought, this wouldn't go so terribly after all. The kitchen had grown even warmer, the air thick with the scent of onions and wood smoke. Rain tapped softly against the windows, a steady rhythm beneath the low murmur of voices. Kaelen stood by the main counter, arms crossed, surveying the assortment of ingredients Aira had gathered. Bundles of carrots, leeks, and potatoes from the farms. A few jars of dried herbs, a small wheel of crumbly cheese, and a sack of grain near the hearth. So this is what you get most often? He asked, his tone calm, almost businesslike. Aira nodded. Farmers drop off what they can spare. Sometimes we trade bread for vegetables or milk. Meat's rarer unless someone hunts. Kaelen hummed in thought, nodding slowly as he began to take stock. Plenty of roots, good starch, enough herbs to bring out flavor. That'll do. He glanced toward the shelf, frowning at the line of dull, uneven knives. Without a word, he took one down and inspected the edge with his thumb. No wonder everything comes out uneven, he muttered. Aira blinked. You can fix that? Kaelen reached for a small whetstone resting near the sink. First rule of a kitchen, your tools work as hard as you do. If they're dull, you're just fighting yourself. He set the stone down and began sharpening the knife, the rhythmic rasp of steel filling the quiet. The sound was oddly soothing, steady and sure. When he finished, he turned the blade, showing her how the edge caught the light. Like that. Always even pressure. Listen for the tone, it'll tell you when it's right. Aira leaned closer, fascinated. That's actually clearer than any explanation I've ever heard? Izzi smirked from her chair. He's full of surprises. Kaelen ignored her and moved toward the fire. You've been burning food because your heat's uneven. Keep the flame steady and low. You want warmth, not fury. He reached for the iron pot, adjusting it slightly over the embers. Like this. You control the flame, not the other way around. Aira nodded, following each movement carefully. Her grandmother, still perched on a stool by the hearth, watched with a skeptical but intrigued eye. All right, Kaelen said, rolling his shoulders. Let's make something simple. Vegetable stew. Start with onions and leeks. Dice them small. Not chunks, uniform pieces. It cooks evenly that way. He demonstrated, the newly sharpened knife slicing through the vegetables in clean, efficient strokes. The sound was quick, precise. The women hovered near, watching as he worked. Aira's brow furrowed. You make it look easy. Kaelen smiled faintly. It is. Once you stop fighting the knife. They added chopped carrots, potatoes, and herbs to the pot, the smell shifting from sharp to rich and earthy as the ingredients met the simmering broth. Kaelen explained each step, how to layer flavor, how to season in stages, how patience was the secret most cooks forgot. By the time the stew began to bubble, Aira's earlier nerves had melted into open admiration. Even her grandmother gave a quiet hum of approval, though she hid it behind a sip of tea. Kaelen glanced at the two of them. Now, he said, wiping his hands, what about meat? Anything fresh? Aira hesitated, then pointed to a wooden crate near the door. 2 hares came in from a trapper this morning. We haven't gotten to them yet. Kaelen nodded. Good. You know how to skin and clean them? She made a face. More or less. He chuckled softly. Show me. Aira fetched one of the hares and laid it on the board. Her hands moved carefully but uncertainly, hesitating at every step. Her cuts uneven. Kaelen watched for a moment, then reached out gently to stop her. Not like that, he said softly. You're fighting it again. Aira glanced up, cheeks warming. Sorry, he shook his head. Don't be. Here. Watch. Kaelen took his own hair, setting the blade just beneath the fur. His movements were smooth, practiced, the skin parting cleanly with each steady pull. You follow the grain, he explained. Don't rush it. Let the knife do the work. Aira watched intently, nodding as he peeled back the hide in a single motion. Try again, he said, handing her the second hair. She swallowed, adjusting her grip. This time her hand was steadier, but still clumsy on the finer cuts. Kaelen stepped behind her, his large hands guiding hers. Like this, he murmured, moving her wrist in rhythm with his own. Small cuts, follow the curve. See? It's not about strength, it's about patience. Aira nodded again, her breath catching slightly as she focused. Patience. Right. Izzi smirked from her seat by the door, watching the two of them lean close over the cutting board. Oh, this is going brilliantly, she whispered to herself. The grandmother coughed softly but said nothing, her eyes glinting with something halfway between amusement and approval. Kaelen finally stepped back, wiping his hands on a cloth. Better, he said. You'll get it with practice. Aira turned, smiling up at him, cheeks faintly flushed. Thank you. I didn't realize it was this kind of skill. Kaelen shrugged, faintly bashful. It's just knowing how to respect the work. She looked at him a moment longer, something new in her gaze, curiosity, warmth, and the beginning of trust. Izzi watched from her chair, arms crossed and grin spreading wider. The kitchen filled with a low, steady hum, the sound of simmering stew, the soft scrape of metal against wood, and rain still whispering against the shutters. Izzi sat quietly now, chin propped on one hand, a small, knowing smile curving her lips as she watched Kaelen at work. After showing Aira and her grandmother the rhythm of sharpening and seasoning, Kaelen had moved on to the hare. He laid the cleaned meat on a board, sprinkling a handful of crushed herbs across the surface. Rosemary, thyme, and a few fragrant leaves Aira hadn't even realized grew in her storeroom. Always start simple, he said, cutting smooth, confident lines through the meat. Butter, herbs, and patience. Anything more and you drown the flavor. He dropped a knob of butter into the pan. It hissed and melted, filling the room with a nutty aroma that turned the grandmother's skeptical hum into something closer to contentment. The scent mingled with the earthy richness of the stew still bubbling nearby, creating a warmth that even the rain couldn't wash away. Aira and her grandmother hovered close, their eyes following every movement. Kaelen's voice was low, his explanations patient, a natural teacher, without ever seeming to realize it. "The butter tells you when it's ready," he said quietly, tilting the pan so the sizzling foam ran clear. "See? That's when the meat goes in." He placed the hair into the pan with a soft hiss. The sound filled the small kitchen, the smell deepening as the herbs released their oils into the butter. Izzi inhaled, smiling to herself. Gods, he really does make it look effortless. When the meat was golden and fragrant, Kaelen divided portions into small bowls, ladling the thick stew alongside. "Here," he said, passing one to Aira and another to her grandmother. Aira hesitated only a moment before taking a bite. Her eyes widened immediately. This is incredible." She glanced between the bowl and Kaelen, almost laughing. "It's the best thing I've ever eaten." Her grandmother took a spoonful herself and gave a small, satisfied nod. "Not bad," she said simply, which Izzi suspected was her way of saying excellent. Kaelen just smiled faintly. "Simple food done right, that's all it is." He showed them how to keep the pot simmering for service, how to stretch a stew without thinning its flavor, when to salt and when to stop. Then he began jotting quick notes in his careful, blocky handwriting, a list of ingredients, simple steps, and substitutions for when they couldn't get fresh herbs or meat. Aira leaned close as he wrote, her shoulder nearly brushing his arm. "You really thought this through," she said, her voice soft with admiration. He glanced at her, shy but pleased. "Food's worth the thought." She laughed, a quiet, genuine sound that filled the room better than any fire. "I don't think anyone's ever said that here before." Izzi just smiled from her seat, saying nothing, her eyes half-lidded with amusement. When they finally cleaned up, Aira crossed the room toward Izzi, wiping her hands on her apron. "Thank you," she said, her smile bright. Izzi raised her brows. "For what?" "For convincing him to help," Aira said. "He's remarkable." Izzi laughed lightly, waving her hand. "It's all Kaelen. I had nothing to do with it." Aira lingered, still smiling. "Even so, thank you." Izzi inclined her head graciously, lips curling into a knowing grin. "Anytime." Aira hesitated a beat longer, her eyes flicking back toward Kaelen, who was busy organizing the knives and jotting down one last note. Then she leaned closer to Izzi, lowering her voice. "Are you two?" she asked, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. Izzi blinked, then let out a soft laugh. "Gods, no," she said. "He's all yours." Aira's face flushed deeper, but the smile she gave was radiant, one that carried through the rest of the rainy afternoon. Izzi watched her go, shaking her head with quiet satisfaction. Hook, line, and sinker, she thought again, this time with a touch of pride. Izzi lingered a moment longer by the doorway, watching Kaelen and Aira as they worked side by side. The air in the kitchen felt lighter now, laughter mixing with the clatter of utensils and the steady hum of the hearth. Even the grandmother, who had been silent most of the morning, was smiling faintly as she kneaded dough at the far table. Izzi smirked to herself. Mission accomplished. She rose from her chair and slipped out quietly, pulling her cloak around her shoulders. The sound of rain had softened to a light drizzle, that calm, silvery quiet that comes just before the clouds finally give way to sunlight. The streets glistened with puddles and the smell of wet earth. She had just stepped into the main hall when the front door opened. Sirius and Priscilla stepped inside, damp from the walk, both carrying parcels. Sirius had a small bundle of herbs tucked under his arm and his usual unreadable expression, while Priscilla held a sack that smelled faintly of fresh bread. Izzi grinned. Perfect timing. Sirius blinked. For what? For a walk. Before either of them could reply, Izzi hooked an arm through each of theirs and began steering them back toward the door. "It just stopped raining," she said brightly. "Let's get some air." Priscilla gave her a sideways look, suspicious but amused. "Air?" she repeated. "Exactly." Izzi tugged harder. "Come on. Beautiful weather, fresh mud, what's not to love?" Sirius resisted for half a second, brow furrowing. "We just walked in." "I know," Izzi said cheerfully, pushing the door open again and ushering them both out into the cooling drizzle. "But trust me, Kaelen might need the room." That earned her a raised eyebrow from Sirius and the faintest smirk from Priscilla. "Oh?" Priscilla murmured, glancing back toward the kitchen. Sirius sighed. "Nothing," Izzi said quickly, her grin widening. The three of them stepped out into the quiet street, the puddles glimmering under a pale sky. The storm had passed, leaving behind that clean, sweet scent of rain-soaked earth. Izzi linked her arms tighter through theirs, humming softly to herself as she guided them down the lane. Behind them, faint laughter drifted through the half-open window. Aira's bright and musical, Kaelen's deep and low in reply. Izzi smiled to herself and looked up at the clearing sky. "Told you this town had potential," she murmured. Priscilla tilted her head, curious. "For what?" New beginnings, Izzi said with a wink. Sirius sighed, though there was a faint smile tugging at his mouth. You two are impossible. Izzi just smiled and shrugged it off. The three of them walked on as the clouds began to break, sunlight spilling through in soft golden bands. The storm was over. Chapter 5. Beneath the Rain. The rain had settled into a steady silver curtain, thin as silk and just as constant. The streets of the small town shimmered beneath it, puddles rippling under each soft patter of water. Sirius pulled his cloak tighter around his shoulders, droplets beading off the black leather. Beside him, Priscilla kept pace with an almost effortless grace, the hood of her cloak drawn low over her pale hair. Her boots made barely a sound, even in the wet mud, and the rain seemed to shy away from her, little rivulets running harmlessly down her sleeves. They slipped beneath the shelter of a canvas awning, its edges dripping steadily. A faded sign swung above them, Healer's Tent, Remedies, Balms, and Salts. Inside, the air was warm and heavy with the scent of crushed herbs and damp linen. Shelves sagged beneath jars of green paste, bundles of drying leaves, and corked vials glowing faintly with tincture light. A woman sat hunched near the back, her hands busy grinding something into a mortar. She looked up only briefly as they entered. You're soaked, she muttered. If you're looking for teas, left shelf, bandages, right. Sirius nodded once in thanks and moved toward the rows of glass jars. Priscilla followed close behind, close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm whenever he reached for something. Still raining, she murmured. He glanced toward the flap of the tent, where water streamed down like liquid glass. She tilted her head. He found a small tin of salve and turned it over in his hand. Burn treatment, he muttered, half to himself. We'll need more of this. You never know when things go wrong. They moved through the tent in companionable silence, the only sound the rain's soft hiss against the canvas. Every now and then, Sirius would reach for a vial on the higher shelves, and Priscilla would steady the lower ones beneath his arm without needing to be asked. When their packs were half full, she spoke again, voice quiet, thoughtful. You used to come to places like this a lot, she said, even before I met you. Sirius paused, his hand hovering over a jar of dried sage. You remember me telling you that? I remember, she said. And that look you always had, like you were thinking of someone else. He closed the tin carefully, slipping it into his pack. I was, he admitted. Priscilla's eyes lifted to his face. Your mother? He nodded. She used to make me fetch things like these. Herbs, salt, oils. I didn't understand half of what she did, but I liked watching her work. There was a faint wistfulness in his voice, something rare, almost fragile. She was gentle? Priscilla asked. Not gentle, Sirius said, shaking his head slightly. Precise. Everything she did had purpose, even her kindness. Priscilla was silent for a moment, studying him. You miss her? He didn't answer right away. The rain outside had softened, the rhythm slowing. I think I miss who she thought I could be, he said finally. That hung in the air, quiet, unforced, true. Priscilla didn't try to answer it. She simply shifted a step closer, her arm brushing his again. Then maybe she'd be proud you still remember. Sirius exhaled, his usual edge softened. Maybe. They finished gathering what they needed in silence. As Sirius paid the healer and slung the bag over his shoulder, Priscilla adjusted the hood of his cloak for him without a word. Outside, the rain had lightened to a drizzle. The muddy street gleamed in the dim light, the air fresh and cool. Sirius glanced at her, faint amusement flickering behind his eyes. You're quiet today. She smiled faintly. Someone has to be. He huffed a laugh and stepped out from under the awning, holding the flap aside for her. Together, they walked through the puddled streets, the sound of their footsteps mingling with the last, lingering drops of rain. The rain never truly stopped, it only softened, thinning into a mist that hung like breath over the market square. The air smelled of wet soil and smoke, and the ground squelched under every step. Sirius and Priscilla moved between the tents in an easy rhythm. He would stop at one stall, check a jar or a bundle, weigh its worth with a glance, and Priscilla would appear beside him a moment later with something else in her hands. A handful of dried mint, a twist of bark, a pouch of powdered valerian root. Most of the vendors were farmers or travelers waiting out the weather, their tents patched and sagging from the damp. Still, the stalls carried life, cured meats hanging from wooden poles, coils of sausage glistening with fat, bundles of thyme and sage drying over coals. Sirius traded a few coins for 2 strips of salted boar, testing their weight before passing one to Priscilla. For later, he said. She nodded, tucking it neatly into her pack. You really do think 3 days ahead of everyone else. He smirked faintly. Someone has to. They made their way from stall to stall, the edges of their cloaks brushing as they moved, a quiet efficiency between them that didn't need words. The mist drifted low across the street, catching faint glimmers of the lanterns now being lit for the evening. By the time their packs were nearly full, the rain had thickened again, not a downpour, but a steady, fine drizzle that blurred the world into silver streaks. Sirius stopped outside one of the tents, a baker's stall with a small wooden awning, and tilted his head toward the sky. Drops caught on his eyelashes and rolled down his face. "Prisk?" he said quietly. She turned, adjusting her hood. He didn't look at her right away. "Why did you tell Kaelen about Elise?" The question caught her off guard. She blinked, unsure how to answer at first. The air between them felt different now, heavy again, like before the storm broke. She finally exhaled, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about her a lot lately." Sirius's jaw tightened slightly. "So you thought Kaelen should too?" "No," Priscilla said gently, "but I'm trying. You said we should trust the ones we travel with, remember? That's what you told me after Rivenholt." Sirius's gaze shifted toward her then, his eyes sharp even under the dim light. She didn't flinch. "I'm trying," she said quietly. "To trust. To speak. You should too." He was silent for a long moment, the kind of silence that felt like it could stretch forever. When he finally spoke, his tone was low, almost thoughtful. Sirius's expression softened, just a trace of sorrow flickering behind the stoicism. "I'll try," he said quietly. "That's all I can promise. That's all I ask," she replied. "Okay." Resting her head on his shoulder, the silence between them eased again. The drizzle softened, the faintest hint of evening light breaking through the clouds, a washed, muted gold. Sirius looked toward the tent beside them, the warm smell of yeast and sugar curling into the air. A baker's table sat just inside, stacked high with glazed buns. He glanced back at Priscilla, a ghost of a grin tugging at his lips. "Sweet bun?" Her eyes lit with something that almost looked like mischief. "Really?" He rolled his eyes but pushed the flap aside for her. "One each," he said. "We're not spending our supply coin on sugar." "Two," she countered, brushing past him with a smirk. "If I'm trying to open up, I deserve a reward." He huffed a quiet laugh. "Impossible." "Learned from the best," she said, smiling as they stepped inside, the warmth of the bakery and the smell of fresh bread chasing the rain from their cloaks. The two left the baker's tent with their purchases tucked neatly away and warm buns in hand. The rain had dwindled to little more than a whisper, a fine mist that clung to their cloaks and turned the cobblestones slick beneath their boots. Priscilla tore a bite from hers, the golden crust flaking as she chewed. "Sweet," she murmured, half to herself. Sirius glanced sideways at her, his own bun mostly untouched. "That's the point," she smirked. "You'd rather it bitter?" He smiled simply, taking a small bite at last. They walked on in comfortable silence, the town around them returning to life after the storm. Smoke rose from chimneys, voices carried faintly from reopened market tents, and puddles reflected the pale glow of lanterns strung along the street. By the time the inn came into view, Priscilla had finished her bun, brushing the crumbs from her fingers. Sirius still had half of his left, though the edges were gone, nibbled absently as he walked. "Admit it," Priscilla said lightly, nodding toward the pastry. "You liked it." He gave a low hum that might have been in agreement. "It wasn't bad." She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "Coming from you, that's practically glowing praise." They reached the inn steps just as the clouds began to part, thin shafts of sunlight streaking through the gray. Sirius reached for the door, holding it open for her as always. He'd barely stepped inside when a familiar voice rang out. "There you are!" Izzi was leaning against the wall near the counter, arms folded and a grin spreading wide across her face. Her hair was still slightly damp from earlier, a few loose strands sticking to her cheek. Sirius blinked, halfway through a bite of his bun. "What?" Priscilla gave him a small nudge in the ribs, sensing trouble. Izzi pushed off the wall and strode over, linking her arms through both of theirs before they could react. "Perfect timing," she said cheerfully. "Let's take a walk." Before either of them could reply, Izzi hooked an arm through each of theirs and began steering them back toward the door. "It just stopped raining," Izzi said brightly. "Let's get some air." Priscilla gave her a sideways look, suspicious but amused. "Air?" she repeated. "Exactly." Izzi tugged harder. "Come on. Beautiful weather, fresh mud, what's not to love?" Sirius resisted for half a second, brow furrowing. "We just walked in." "I know," Izzi said cheerfully, pushing the door open again and ushering them both out into the cooling drizzle. "But trust me, Kaelen might need the room." That earned her a raised eyebrow from Sirius and the faintest smirk from Priscilla. "Oh?" Priscilla murmured, glancing back toward the kitchen. Sirius sighed. "Nothing," Izzi said quickly, her grin widening. The day passed easily enough, a rare kind of quiet that none of them were used to. Izzi, Sirius, and Priscilla wandered the town's muddy lanes, watching the villagers repair carts, hang laundry, and sweep the storm's remnants from their doorways. The smell of rain lingered in the air, sharp and clean, and every puddle caught the orange glow of the setting sun. By the time the sky deepened to blue, torches had been lit along the streets, their flames flickering gold against the damp stones. Laughter and distant song drifted through the air from the taverns. The town, small as it was, had come alive again after the rain. When the three finally turned the corner leading back to the inn, Sirius slowed his stride. The warm light from the windows spilled out across the street, voices rising inside, laughter, chatter, the scrape of chairs against the floorboards. He gave a low whistle, busier than before. Izzi grinned. Guess someone's been working his charm. As they stepped through the door, the smell hit them first, roasted herbs and butter, smoke and bread. The little inn was full now, every table taken, plates and mugs clattering as patrons ate and drank in cheerful disarray. Sirius looked around, half impressed. Didn't think the place could even fit this many people. Izzi leaned over the counter to peek toward the kitchen, curiosity bright in her eyes. Inside, the hearth still glowed, but the counters were spotless. The only movement came from Gran, dozing in a chair, her head nodding slightly with each quiet snore. On the door hung a hand-painted sign, crooked but legible, closed for the evening. Izzi smirked, lowering her voice. Oh, it's that kind of closed. Priscilla tilted her head, puzzled. What kind? Izzi didn't answer, she only grinned wider. The three climbed the stairs, their boots creaking on the old boards. The hallway above was dim, the sconces burning low, shadows dancing along the walls. As they reached the second floor, the door to their room opened. Aira stepped out. Her hair was a tousled halo of gold, a few loose curls sticking to her flushed cheeks. Her dress hung a little askew, one shoulder bare, the other sliding precariously down her arm. She held her shoes in one hand, the other pressed nervously to her chest as the door clicked shut behind her. She froze for half a heartbeat when she saw them. Aira's face went crimson. She dipped her head quickly, mumbling, "Evening," before scurrying past them down the hall, her bare feet silent on the wooden floorboards. Izzi watched her go, then turned to Sirius and Priscilla, grinning ear to ear. Perfect timing, I suppose, Sirius exhaled through his nose, unimpressed. I know, Izzi said brightly, knocking on the door. Kaelen, you decent? A voice came from inside, deep and relaxed. Yeah, come in. Izzi pushed the door open and stopped, lips twitching. Kaelen was sitting on the edge of his bed, shirtless, his skin gleaming faintly in the torchlight. He was still half damp from a wash, dark hair mussed, the air around him thick with the scent of soap and smoke. His trousers were slung low on his hips, and his grin was as satisfied as it was tired. Well, Izzi said, crossing her arms. Someone looks busy. Kaelen leaned back on his hands, eyes half-lidded with smug exhaustion. It was a productive day. Sirius stepped past Izzi, expression neutral as ever. So I noticed. You doubled the inn's income. Maybe more, Kaelen said, stretching his arms with a groan. Taught them a thing or two about spice, too. Izzi smirked. Is that what they're calling it now? Priscilla hid a quiet laugh behind her hand. Kaelen gave her a pointed look but said nothing, just leaned back further with a sigh. You three have fun in town? Nothing compared to what you had, Izzi shot back. Sirius rolled his eyes and dropped into the chair by the window, still munching absently on the last of his bun. Remind me never to share rooms with you again. Izzi only grinned wider, tossing her cloak onto the bed. Oh please, you wouldn't miss it for the world. The room settled into a warm, comfortable silence, water still dripping faintly from the eaves outside, the torches burning low. Laughter, warmth, and the faint scent of spice still hanging in the air. Chapter 6. Spirits and Dead Things. Morning light spilled through the inn's windows in soft, golden bands. The storm had long passed, leaving the air clear and sharp, the scent of rain still lingering on the cobblestones outside. The main hall hummed with the quiet murmur of voices and the clatter of wooden plates. The group sat together at one of the long tables near the hearth. The fire crackled low, casting a gentle warmth over their faces as Aira and her grandmother moved between tables serving breakfast. Izzi leaned forward eagerly as a plate was set before her. Thick slices of fried bread, roasted vegetables, and strips of cured boar glazed with honey and herbs. Well, Izzi said, twirling her fork with exaggerated flair. Someone's been paying attention to their teacher. Kaelen smirked. I'd say she learned fast. Izzi took a bite and let out a soft hum. Fast? She's a prodigy. This is actually good. She turned to Aira, who was blushing faintly as she passed another table. Your cooking's improved overnight. Aira smiled shyly. Kaelen's a patient teacher. Izzi raised a brow, grinning. Oh, I bet he is. Kaelen shot her a look over his mug. Don't start. But she already had. I'm just saying, you two certainly found the recipe for a good evening. Priscilla, seated beside her, glanced up from her plate, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. She added softly, "Spice." "Spice," Izzi choked on her drink, laughing. Kaelen's eyes darted between the two of them, utterly betrayed. "Gods," he groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. "There's two of you now." The rest of breakfast passed in easy laughter and good food, a rare peace among their usual chaos. When the last of the plates were cleared, they gathered their gear near the door. Aira approached, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes finding Kaelen's. "I never properly thanked you," she said softly. "For everything. The recipes, the help, the company." Kaelen opened his mouth to reply, but she rose on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Safe travels," she whispered. Kaelen froze for a moment, a faint flush creeping up his neck before giving her a small, genuine smile. "Take care of the place, all right?" "I will." Izzi, standing nearby, leaned toward Sirius and whispered, "And that's breakfast and dessert." Sirius gave her a flat look. "You really can't help yourself." "Nope." When they finally stepped out of the inn, the morning air was crisp, sunlight gleaming off puddles still scattered across the road. The little town was already stirring, farmers leading carts of vegetables toward the market, smiths opening their forges, children darting through the streets chasing each other. Beyond the rooftops, in the far, far distance, the faint outline of the mountain rose like a jagged shadow against the pale horizon. Sirius followed Izzi's gaze toward it, his expression sharpening. "That's our road," he said. "We'll need to cross the bridge and cut through the forest before the next town." Izzi shaded her eyes, squinting toward the mountain. "Doesn't look too far." Kaelen adjusted his pack. "That's what you said last time." Sirius ignored them both, his tone turning serious. "Stay alert. The roads ahead aren't as safe as these. Bandits, beasts, worse sometimes." Priscilla tightened her cloak, stepping up beside Izzi and looping her arm through hers, her usual place at Sirius's side now filled with quiet, feminine solidarity. Izzi smiled faintly and gave her arm a gentle squeeze. "Guess we're the welcoming committee if anything happens." Sirius glanced back at them, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. "Just try not to start the fight before we get there." Izzi grinned. "No promises." And with that, the party set off. Boots striking damp earth, sunlight breaking through the clouds in thin, golden beams. The town faded behind them, its warmth replaced by the long, winding road and the distant pull of the mountain that waited beyond the forests ahead. The road stretched on beneath a pale morning sky, the soft clatter of boots and the rhythmic creak of leather the only sounds breaking the stillness. Fields gave way to sparse woods, the scent of wet earth thick in the air. By midday, the path sloped downward, and the dull roar of water reached their ears, a river, fast and swollen from the recent rains. Sirius raised a hand, signaling a stop. "We're close." The group rounded a bend and the bridge came into view, a narrow span of stone and timber stretching over a churning gorge. Mist rolled off the river below, cold and white, catching the sunlight in fractured beams. Then the smell hit them. It came like a wall, thick, cloying, impossible to ignore. Izzi's nose wrinkled immediately, one hand coming up to her mouth. "Gods," she muttered, her voice muffled. "Something's dead. Or a lot of somethings." Sirius's expression hardened. "Stay sharp." They slowed their pace, boots crunching softly over damp gravel. The closer they came, the stronger it got, the metallic tang of blood mingled with the sour stench of decay. Izzi stepped ahead a few paces, scanning the bridge. At first she thought the dark patches on the stone were just water, but as the mist shifted, the truth emerged. Bodies. Dozens of them. They were strewn across the bridge and along the riverbank, bandits by the look of them, still in bits of mismatched armor and tattered cloaks. Their weapons lay scattered where they fell, slick with dried black blood. Izzi's hand went instinctively to her dagger. "What in all the hells?" Kaelen came up beside her, his jaw tight. Bandits, all right, but they didn't stand a chance. It was true. Many of the corpses were cleaved cleanly through, torsos split, limbs severed with brutal precision. Others bore puncture wounds so neat they could only have come from sharpened steel. Sirius crouched near one of the bodies, brushing rainwater from a shredded cuirass. "Steel," he said quietly. "Not claws, not fire. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." Izzi glanced up and down the bridge, trying to make sense of it. The carnage was almost surgical, efficient, but merciless. "Could it have been soldiers?" she asked. "An ambush?" Sirius shook his head. No banners, no sign of formation. He stood, scanning the tree line. Looks more like a massacre than a battle. The group crossed carefully, stepping around the fallen. Priscilla stayed close to Sirius, one arm wrapped over her mouth and nose, her eyes downcast. Even she, who had seen more than most, looked unsettled. Kaelen kept his hand on his sword, eyes darting to every sound. "We shouldn't linger," he said gruffly. "Whoever did this might still be close." Sirius nodded but knelt once more beside a corpse, turning it slightly. The wound was clean, too clean. "No, these bodies are old," he said. "A week, maybe more. Whoever did this is long gone." Izzi crouched beside another body, rifling through a pouch. "Still," she said. "No sense wasting what's left." She found a few coins, a strip of dried meat still sealed, and an unbroken flask. Not much, but it's something. Kaelen frowned but didn't argue. He and Sirius gathered what they could. A few daggers still intact, a handful of coins, a half-empty quiver of arrows. The sound of the river roared below, drowning out the silence that hung over the bridge. When they finally crossed, Izzi glanced back once. The mist had swallowed the bridge again, the bodies fading into pale white fog. "What could have done that?" she asked softly. Sirius didn't answer right away. He simply stared into the mist. "Something efficient," he said at last. "And something dangerous." Kaelen adjusted his pack, his tone low. "Then we keep moving." Eyes open. And with that they pressed onward, the bridge and its horrors vanishing behind them, the road ahead winding deeper into the forest's shadow. The trees rose taller now, their dark branches closing in like fingers, and the last traces of sunlight began to fade beneath their canopy. The path beyond the bridge narrowed, swallowed by towering trees and curling roots. What sunlight managed to pierce the canopy came in thin, ghostly shafts, illuminating the mist that clung low to the ground. For a long while, no one spoke. The smell of iron and blood faded behind them, replaced by damp moss, rot, and the faint sweetness of wet bark. Sirius led the way, his steps soundless despite the carpet of fallen leaves. Every so often, he'd glance toward the tree line, eyes narrowing at a rustle too distant to place. "These woods," he said finally, voice low, "aren't kind. Bandits were the least of it." Kaelen adjusted the strap on his pack. "What else lives out here?" "Things that don't always stay dead," Sirius replied. "And things that don't much care who walks into their territory." Izzi exhaled, her eyes scanning the darkened branches. "Wonderful. Exactly what I needed. Ominous warnings in the middle of nowhere." "Consider it a courtesy," Sirius said without looking back. The group pressed on as the light faded. The forest grew denser, the air cooler, the silence thicker. Every sound seemed amplified, the snap of a twig, the soft rustle of unseen wings, the distant creak of old wood shifting in the wind. By nightfall they found a small clearing just large enough for a fire. The trees ringed them close, their black silhouettes twisting upward like watchful sentinels. Kaelen cleared a patch of ground with his boot while Izzi gathered fallen branches. The fire sputtered to life reluctantly, a small, flickering flame that barely kept back the cold. They laid out their bedrolls in a loose circle. Sirius sat with his back against a log, polishing his dagger, while Priscilla tucked herself into her blanket beside him. She was asleep within minutes, her breathing soft and steady. Kaelen settled near the fire, his sword resting across his knees. Izzi took her place beside him, the two sharing the quiet rhythm of the night watch. The forest beyond their small circle of light was utterly still. The kind of silence that pressed in close, heavy, and listening. Izzi stared into the fire, her mind wandering despite herself. "You ever notice," she murmured, "that it's always too quiet before something happens?" Kaelen smirked faintly. "You saying that to tempt fate?" "Maybe," she said, tossing another stick into the flame. "Better than waiting for it to find us." Kaelen's gaze shifted toward the tree line. "I'd prefer if it didn't." Izzi leaned back on her elbows, looking over at Sirius, his form barely visible in the dim glow. Even half asleep, he looked alert, one hand resting loosely on the hilt of his weapon. Kaelen followed her gaze, shaking his head. "Does he ever sleep?" "Sometimes," Izzi said softly. "But I think he dreams with his eyes open." Kaelen chuckled under his breath. "That's unsettling." The wind stirred through the trees, a low, sighing sound that made the branches sway like restless shadows. The fire flickered, throwing their faces in shades of orange and gold. Neither of them noticed Priscilla shift slightly in her sleep, her hand finding the edge of Sirius's cloak. He didn't move, didn't even glance her way, but his fingers brushed hers for the briefest moment, a silent, protective gesture. Izzi looked out into the forest again, her voice barely above a whisper. "You think whoever did that back there is still out here?" Kaelen stared into the dark. "If they are," he said, "let's hope they're not watching us now." The flames crackled softly, the forest answering with nothing but its endless, quiet breath. Above them, the stars began to vanish behind drifting mist, and somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of running water echoed, steady, rhythmic, almost like laughter carried on the wind. But none of them noticed it yet. The first light of dawn crept through the forest canopy in pale streaks, painting the mist in shades of silver and blue. The fire had long since burned down to embers, the faint smell of smoke lingering in the cool air. Kaelen stirred first, his back ached from the cold ground, and his breath came out in slow clouds. For a long moment, he just sat there, listening, the steady hum of insects, the distant gurgle of running water. The forest was still, too still. He glanced around the camp. Sirius was asleep, sitting upright. Priscilla curled close beside him beneath his cloak. Izzi lay sprawled on her side, a strand of hair covering half her face, her arm draped lazily over her pack. Kaelen exhaled softly, amused despite himself. "Rise and shine, elf," he murmured, nudging her boot with his own. Izzi groaned, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. 5 more minutes. He shook his head, stretching his shoulders. "You said that yesterday." "Yesterday it was raining." He snorted but let her be. "I'll fetch water," he said quietly, though she hardly seemed to hear him. He slung his canteen over his shoulder and followed the faint sound of the river, weaving through the thick roots and moss. The air was cooler here, the forest floor slick with dew. Shafts of pale morning light broke through the canopy in narrow beams, catching on drifting motes of mist. When he reached the stream, he knelt by the bank and splashed the cold water onto his face. The shock of it woke him fully, chasing away the sleep still clinging to his eyes. He filled the canteen, listening to the gentle rush of the current. That's when he heard it. Voices. Soft. Musical. Laughing. He froze, his hand tightening on the canteen. The sound came from farther downstream, just beyond a bend where the light shimmered golden through the trees. Cautiously, he moved toward it, pushing through the ferns until the view opened before him. The stream widened into a shallow pool, its surface glimmering like glass. And there, half hidden by mist and sunlight, were shapes. 7 of them. Women. They stood knee-deep in the water, their skin luminous against the morning light, hair golden as wheat and falling wet over bare shoulders. Each of them moved with an unnatural grace, laughter echoing softly like music through the trees. For a heartbeat, Kaelen forgot to breathe. They looked almost human, but something about them, the way the light bent around their forms, the way their laughter harmonized, felt wrong. Too perfect, too smooth. One of them turned her head. Her eyes caught his, a pale, glassy blue that glowed faintly beneath the surface of the water. Kaelen stumbled back a step, heart quickening. Before he could speak, the others turned too, 6 pairs of identical eyes fixing on him. The laughter stopped. Their smiles lingered, but they no longer reached their eyes. Kaelen swallowed hard, taking another step back. "Didn't mean to..." The nearest one tilted her head, water dripping from her fingertips as she lifted a hand toward him. "Stay," she whispered. Her voice was soft as breath, but it seemed to slide beneath his skin. Kaelen blinked, swaying slightly, the world around him shifting, distant. The air hummed faintly, like the world itself was vibrating to some hidden rhythm. He tried to move, to breathe. But something in those eyes held him still. Another step forward and his boot caught on a root. He toppled backward, the world tilting, his head striking the damp ground with a dull thud. Everything went black. Back at camp, the forest had grown quiet again. Too quiet. Izzi stirred, frowning at the faint echo of something distant, a sound she couldn't quite place. A soft thump. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Kaelen?" she called softly. No answer. She frowned, pushing herself to her feet. "Kaelen." Still nothing. Panic flickered in her chest. She glanced toward the dying fire, then at the sleeping figures nearby. Sirius, always half awake, was the first to stir at her voice. Izzy? He murmured, sitting upright. She was already shaking his shoulder. Something's wrong. Kaelen went for water. I heard something, by the river. Sirius was on his feet instantly, his expression sharpening as he grabbed his cloak and sword. Which way? Izzy pointed through the trees. That way. Hurry. Priscilla blinked awake as they passed, drowsy and confused, but Sirius just gestured for her to stay back. Izzy was already moving, darting through the underbrush, her boots splashing through puddles as she followed the faint sound of the stream. The air was colder here. Somewhere ahead, the river whispered, and something else. Faint, melodic, like laughter carried on the wind. Izzy slowed, heart pounding, her voice trembling as she called out again. Kaelen? Izzy broke through the tree line, her breath sharp in her chest, boots splashing through the shallows as she hit the riverbank. The water was shockingly cold, biting at her ankles as she waded in. Kaelen! She called, her voice echoing through the mist. Only the rush of the river answered. She turned, scanning the banks, her eyes darting between every shadow, every ripple on the surface. Damn it, Kaelen, where are… Then she heard them. Voices. Soft and lilting, not words but music. Notes carried on the air, weaving between the trees like a melody the forest itself was humming. Izzy froze. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. The song grew clearer, laughter intertwined with it now, delicate and warm. Then, a sound that shattered it all, a crack, a heavy thud, wood splintering, echoing through the trees like a breaking bone. Kaelen? She shouted, panic rising. Behind her, Sirius's voice carried faintly through the woods, distant but firm. Izzy. Wait, slow down. But she was already running. Water splashed up her legs as she darted forward, the cold forgotten. The song grew louder with each step, until she broke through the mist and found herself before a wide, shallow pool. There, in the morning haze, 6 figures moved in the water. Women, or something like it. They stood half-submerged, their skin pale and flawless, their hair black as wet ink cascading down their backs. The water shimmered around them like liquid glass, their reflections blurring into ripples of light. Izzy froze where she stood, her breath catching in her throat. The women turned toward her, their movements slow, deliberate, all at once. 6 pairs of eyes fixed on her, shimmering silver under the dim light. Her heart pounded as she tried to speak, but no words came. The nearest one smiled. Not kindly. Izzy took a step back, instinct screaming at her to run. A hand touched her face. Soft, cold. Fingers slid gently over her eyes, covering them completely. Izzy's breath hitched. A voice, low and melodic, brushed against her ear. Sweet as honey, sharp as glass. Stay. The words sank into her like a command, resonating in her chest, freezing her where she stood. The sound of the river faded. The song, the voices, everything, seemed to drown in that single whisper. Her pulse thundered, the world tilting. The scent of water and wildflowers filled her lungs. Too sweet, too perfect. And then, darkness. Sirius moved carefully through the trees, the sound of rushing water growing louder with each step. The forest around him was heavy with mist, still, save for the distant drip of dew falling from leaves. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The stream curved before him, silver in the pale morning light. No sign of Izzy. No movement. He crouched, fingers brushing against the mud where footprints marked the bank. 2 sets. Hers and Kaelen's. They ended by the water. Sirius rose slowly, hand resting on the hilt of his sword, scanning the trees. Nothing. Only the whisper of the river. Then he heard it. A sound carried faintly over the water, soft voices, lilting, feminine, the same cadence that had drawn the others. He frowned, his mind pulling back to another time, another shore. Sirens? No. This was different. No song, no rhythm meant to lure. Something older, deeper. He stepped carefully across the stones, eyes narrowing as he caught the faintest shimmer through the mist. The voices grew clearer now, joined by another sound, the sharp crack of wood splintering, heavy and sudden, echoing through the valley. A tree falling. Sirius stilled for a heartbeat, listening. Then he moved forward again, slow and deliberate, until the forest opened around him. The pool lay ahead, shallow, wide, smooth as glass, and in it, 6 women. Their hair was chestnut brown this time, flowing like river water down their backs, their skin pale and smooth beneath the shifting light. They stood half-submerged, silent now, as if the forest itself held its breath with them. Sirius's eyes narrowed. He couldn't see their faces, only the curves of their shoulders, the way their hair veiled them like curtains of silk. He took half a step closer, the water whispering around his boots. Then something cold touched his skin. Hands, soft, wet, slid over his eyes from behind. "Stay." A voice breathed into his ear. Sirius's reaction was instant. He twisted, breaking the touch, his sword flashing free with a whisper of steel. He dropped into the shallows, knees hitting the cold water, blade raised toward the source. She stood before him, the 7th, naked, her long chestnut hair clinging to her skin, her eyes dark and fathomless. Water dripped from her fingertips in perfect rhythm, every movement deliberate, elegant. Sirius's jaw tightened. His expression remained calm, but there was a sharpness in his gaze, the kind of quiet anger born of recognition. The woman smiled faintly. She took a slow step forward, the water rippling around her thighs. Her eyes never left his, her hands lifted, cool, slender fingers brushing against her own cheeks. Before his eyes, freckles bloomed across her pale skin like drops of color spreading through paint. Then her fingers slid up, covering her eyes. When she lowered them again, her irises were gone. Gray. Empty. Sirius froze. He knew what they were now. Nymphs, not the playful spirits from old stories, but the kind that had turned rivers red in ages past. The kind that lured the weary, the wounded, the lost. The air seemed to thicken, the mist curling tighter around them. The woman before him moved closer, her arms opening slightly, inviting, gentle. Behind him, the water stirred. 6 pale hands broke the surface, then 6 more. They slid over his arms, his shoulders, his back, cool as death and twice as soft. He tensed, every muscle coiled, but he didn't strike. For a long moment, Sirius stood there, surrounded, the water rising to his waist now, the nymphs' touch light but firm as they drew him closer to the heart of the pool. He closed his eyes. Just let this happen. The thought wasn't defeat, it was something quieter, almost resigned. The exhaustion that comes when the world has asked too much for too long. The cold deepened. The air hummed faintly, almost melodic. The forest seemed to fade, replaced by the sound of his heartbeat echoing through the water. The water around Sirius rippled as the nymph's hands tightened, drawing him further into the pool. Their faces hovered inches from his, serene and hollow, their mouths forming silent words he couldn't quite hear. Then something shifted. A sound, faint at first, cutting through the low hum of the river, a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Sirius turned his head slightly and saw it. Across the pool, half hidden by the fog and hanging moss, stood a massive tree, its bark warped and knotted in unnatural shapes, and within those shapes, faces. His blood ran cold. Izzi and Kaelen. Their bodies were bound in the tree's surface, half swallowed by its trunk. The wood had grown over their arms and legs, vines coiling like veins across their skin. Their eyes were closed, breaths shallow, as if the forest itself had claimed them. Sirius's jaw tightened, his hand gripping the hilt of his blade. Not yet, he thought, the words steady in his mind. Not just yet. He turned back toward the nymph before him, the 7th, her expression placid, eyes gray and endless. Then the air cracked, a sharp splash and a roar. Something blurred past him, cutting through the mist. Sirius! Priscilla hit the water like a storm. Her nails had lengthened into claws, black and gleaming, and her fangs flashed as she snarled. Her wings tore through the fabric of her tunic in a burst of sound and shadow, spreading wide in a spray of water. A long, scaled tail whipped behind her, slicing through the pool with a hiss. The 7th nymph barely turned before Priscilla was on her, knocking her backward into the water with a sound that was half shriek, half splash. Sirius staggered a step, the sudden chaos shattering the spell that clung to him. The world came rushing back, the cold, the noise, the weight of the moment. He surged forward, reaching through the water. Priscilla! She turned, her wings catching the dim light, black and gleaming like wet obsidian. The nymphs in the pool hissed, their voices no longer melodic but warped, their faces twisting in fury. Priscilla's clawed hand shot out, gripping Sirius's wrist. "Move," she hissed. He pulled, bracing against the drag of the water, and together they stumbled toward the bank, Sirius half carrying her as her wings folded tight against her back. The air around them shuddered with sound, a wail that wasn't quite human echoing from the pool as the nymphs rose in unison, their faces contorted, their once perfect features rippling like disturbed reflections. Sirius turned back, eyes hard and unblinking. The tree loomed behind them now, massive and twisted, and within its dark bark, Izzi and Kaelen were still trapped, their bodies entwined, their faces pale. Sirius's expression hardened, his eyes locked on the 7 figures wading toward them through the mist. Their movements were no longer graceful, their laughter was gone. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. Priscilla shook her head, lips curling into something between defiance and a snarl. Not a chance. Together they backed toward the tree, weapons ready, water dripping from their clothes, eyes never leaving the advancing nymphs. The forest had gone completely silent again. No birds, no wind, just the whisper of the water and the sound of 7 sets of footsteps approaching through the shallows. The forest held its breath. Sirius and Priscilla stood in the shallows, the water dark around their boots, the 7 nymphs staring back at them through the rising mist. Their faces were still, unreadable, carved from calm itself. Then, slowly, the sound came again. Footsteps in water, soft, unhurried. The nymphs advanced as one, their movements measured, their eyes faintly luminescent in the half-light. The river's surface shimmered, tiny ripples forming concentric circles around them. Priscilla braced herself, her tail lashing behind her, wings half unfurled. Sirius raised his sword slightly, ready but steady. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Then the voices came. "Go!" It was one voice, yet many, a perfect unison that resonated like an echo through the trees. "Leave!" Sirius's brow furrowed, his stance not shifting. "Funny," he said quietly. "You said stay not too long ago." At that, the 7 nymphs tilted their heads in unison, like a reflection caught in water. The 7th, the one who had touched him, stepped forward, her hands lifted slowly, palms open in a gesture that was neither threat nor invitation. Her voice alone spoke now, soft but clear. "We guard the forest, the roots, the river. You trespass where few are meant to walk." Her gaze drifted toward the great tree, its bark still pulsing faintly with the unnatural glow that held Izzi and Kaelen fast. "They were touched by the hunger," she said, her tone almost mournful. "The forest took them to protect itself." Sirius's grip on his sword eased slightly, confusion flickering through his features. "Protect?" The nymph nodded once, her long hair rippling like current. "The blood you carry burns. The fire in her veins." Her eyes flicked briefly to Priscilla, and the shadow in yours. "The forest remembers both." Sirius exhaled slowly through his nose. "We didn't come to harm your woods." The nymph's expression softened, almost human. "Then leave it as you found it." She turned toward the great tree and lifted one hand. The bark groaned and shifted, the wood twisting as if taking a breath. Vines loosened, sliding away like retreating serpents, and 2 figures fell forward onto the damp earth, gasping, coughing, but alive. "Izzi," Sirius muttered, already moving. He knelt beside her, helping her upright, while Kaelen groaned beside him, rubbing at his temple. Izzi blinked blearily, her voice hoarse. What happened?" "Later," Sirius said, his tone firm but gentle. "We're leaving." Behind them, the 7th nymph spoke once more, her voice softer now, no longer command, but plea. "Go." The forest sleeps uneasily. Priscilla, her claws already dulling back to fingers, her tail fading to nothing, glanced over her shoulder at the nymphs. For the first time, their faces didn't look cold, only tired, ancient. She helped Kaelen to his feet, while Sirius pulled Izzi up with a steady hand. None of them spoke again, they backed away slowly, keeping their eyes on the water. The nymphs did not follow. Only when the trees closed behind them and the mist thinned did they finally break into a run, crashing through the underbrush until the sound of the river faded and the air began to clear. When they reached the edge of the forest, the light hit them like a balm. The road stretched ahead once more, the smell of clean rain and open air washing away the damp, heavy scent of moss and bark. Izzi leaned on Kaelen's arm, still dazed. "I don't think I like this forest anymore," she muttered. Kaelen managed a weak grin. "Agreed." Sirius turned back once, looking into the shadows between the trees. For a moment, he thought he saw the faint shimmer of water and 7 figures watching from the mist. Then they were gone. He adjusted his cloak and started down the road. "Let's move, before the forest changes its mind." Priscilla fell in beside him, silent again, her hand brushing his briefly. And as the four of them walked into the pale morning light, the forest behind them sighed, a sound like wind through hollow branches, low and endless, as if something vast had just settled back into its slumber. The four of them stumbled back onto the main road, breath ragged, clothes still damp and streaked with mud. The forest loomed behind them like a dark wall, the morning light pale and distant through the mist. They walked a few more paces before stopping, every one of them too winded to speak. Izzi bent forward, hands on her knees, exhaling hard. "By the gods," she said between breaths. "Can we all agree no more shortcuts through haunted woods?" Kaelen leaned against a boulder, wiping water from his hair. "Agreed." Sirius crouched, catching his breath slower than the rest, but steady. Priscilla sat beside him, wings long gone, her clothes torn at the shoulders, her expression tired but calm. For a long moment, none of them said anything. Then Izzi straightened, brushing the dirt off her trousers and forcing a grin. "Well," she said, her tone too bright for the exhaustion in her face. "Thanks for the save, both of you. Really. I owe you." Sirius looked up at her, one corner of his mouth twitching faintly. "That's 2 now, elf." Izzi blinked. 2? "The bandits," he said simply. "And now the forest spirits." "Oh, right." She crossed her arms, mock scowling. "You keep count, do you?" "Someone has to." Kaelen gave a low chuckle and Izzi rolled her eyes, but the tension was already breaking. After a few steps down the road, Izzi looked back at Sirius. "So, what were they?" "Nymphs," he said. "Old spirits. Guardians of rivers and roots. They take form from your mind, become what you want to see most, or what tempts you." Izzi frowned. "That's unsettling." Kaelen snorted. "That explains a lot." She turned on him. "What's that supposed to mean?" He grinned, leaning on his pack. "Well, you didn't see them." 6 naked blondes, Izzi. 6. Izzi's mouth dropped open. "Excuse me? Was Era not enough for you?" Sirius smirked faintly. Priscilla covered her mouth, hiding her laughter poorly. "Oh, don't look at me like that," Kaelen went on, unable to stop himself. "What about you, huh? Let me guess. Black hair? Someone from the past, maybe?" Izzi sputtered. "Kaelen." Her voice cracked on his name, half outrage, half embarrassment. Priscilla actually laughed aloud now, a soft melodic sound that she quickly tried to smother with her hand. "Oh, shut it, you," Izzi said, glaring playfully at her. "What did you see?" Priscilla only smiled, a little smug, a little sweet. But before she could reply, Sirius spoke. "She didn't," he said. Izzi raised a brow. "What?" Sirius shook his head. "She is a dragon," he said simply. "Mythical beast, remember? That sort of thing never seemed to work on her." Priscilla grinned and stuck out her tongue at Izzi, who groaned dramatically. "Oh, that's just not fair." She turned then, squinting at Sirius with a wicked grin. "All right then, Mr. Unshakable. What about you, Sirius blinked, entirely unimpressed. "Me? Yes, you. Everyone saw something, didn't they? What did you see?" Kaelen, arms crossed, smirked. "Yeah, come on. Don't tell me even the half-elf is made of stone." For a moment, Sirius didn't answer. His gaze wandered toward the horizon, the faint lines of fatigue softening in the morning light. Finally, he sighed. "I don't remember." Izzi huffed. "Oh, that's convenient." Kaelen chuckled. "Try harder." Sirius's lips twitched, almost like he regretted saying anything at all. But at last, he said, "Chestnut hair, gray eyes." The air went still. Izzi's face went scarlet. "Oh," she said faintly. "Oh, really?" Kaelen caught it instantly and choked back a laugh. "Gray eyes, huh?" Sirius tilted his head, studying Izzi's reaction with his usual calm. "Why?" Izzi crossed her arms, cheeks burning. "No reason?" Priscilla's laugh slipped out before she could stop it, covering her mouth as Kaelen started outright snickering. Izzi shot him a death glare. "Don't you dare." But Kaelen was already grinning, eyes bright. "Gray eyes, chestnut hair. Gods, I think he means you." Izzi groaned, turning away, trying to hide her flustered expression. "You're all insufferable." Sirius said nothing, but a faint, knowing smile tugged at the corner of his lips. The road stretched on before them, the forest fading into the distance, the mountains still far ahead. Their laughter echoed through the quiet, mingling with the sound of wind in the trees, a fragile, welcome warmth after the cold of the forest. Chapter 7. Mutual Understanding. The rain had slowed to a lazy drizzle, each drop sliding down the blackened stone of the bridge and mingling with the blood that pooled between its boards. The morning mist hadn't yet lifted. It hung thick and heavy, masking the full extent of the carnage. Lysandra sat cross-legged on the railing, humming faintly to herself as she cleaned the edge of her new dagger. Her reflection flickered in the wet blade, a faint smile, eyes bright with mischief and exhaustion. Beside her, an undead hound lay with its head in her lap, ribs moving faintly with every shallow breath it pretended to take. Corin stood a few paces away, wiping his broadsword clean against a torn cloak. His jaw was set, his armor slick with grime and gore. The corpses at his feet were bandits mostly, at least what remained of them. "Do you ever tire of this?" he asked at last, his voice low and even. Lysandra didn't look up. "Of what?" He gestured vaguely to the mess around them, the detours. She smiled faintly, eyes still on her blade. "You say that like there's anything else to tire of." Corin exhaled through his nose. "We're supposed to be heading to the mountain, not playing executioners for sport." Lysandra leaned forward, balancing effortlessly on the slick railing. "You worry too much, Corin. The mountain isn't going anywhere. What's one day to breathe? Enjoy the scenery?" He glanced down at the heap of bodies. "Scenery? It's lovely," she said softly, flicking her dagger. The motion sent a droplet of blood arcing into the mist. Corin's eyes narrowed. "You're reckless. Always have been. And I still don't know why Celine puts up with it." That drew her attention. Lysandra looked over her shoulder, the smile faltering for just a heartbeat. "Maybe she sees the value in me. Maybe she should have burned the rest of you," Corin said coldly. The words hung between them, sharp as steel. Lysandra's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Slowly, she pulled up the edge of her skirt, revealing legs pale and flawless, healed as if the fire that had consumed them never happened. "See? Perfectly fine," she said, voice quiet but tight. Corin didn't look impressed. "You fucked up," he said. "We both know it. If not for Celine's healing pools, you would have been done." Her eyes darkened, the playfulness fading completely. "Yet I'm still here." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "For now." The undead hound stirred, baring its broken teeth at him, but Lysandra ran her fingers through its rotted fur, calming it. "You can glower all you want," she murmured. "Celine gave the orders, and we're following them. You don't have to like me." Corin sheathed his sword. "Good. Good," she said, smiling again, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mutual understanding." A faint sound broke through the steady rain. Corin turned. One of the bandits, impossibly, was still alive, dragging himself along the planks, smearing red across the soaked wood. He was half blind, gasping, his hand reaching toward the broken railing as if freedom was still an option. Corin walked to him without a word. The man tried to speak, a broken plea lost in his throat, but Corin silenced him with a swift thrust of his blade. The body stilled instantly. Lysandra leaned her cheek against her hand, watching the blood trickle down between the boards. "Nasty business," she said softly. Corin looked back at her. "You enjoy it?" She tilted her head, eyes bright again. "Maybe." The mist thickened around them, the sound of the river below turning low and distant. Corin sheathed his sword, his voice quieter now. "You can play at purpose all you like, but if Celine grows tired of your games..." Lysandra smiled faintly, looking out over the red-washed bridge toward the faint outline of the mountain beyond. "Well, let's just not disappoint." The hound at her side let out a rattling growl that might have been laughter. The two stood there in silence for a while longer, the corpses cooling beneath them, the rain beginning again in soft, steady sheets. High above the valley, lightning cracked once against the far peak of the mountain, a silent reminder of what still awaited them. Rain slicked the cobblestones, turning the dirt road into a river of grime that gleamed like dull silver. The town ahead was little more than a cluster of leaning timber and soot-stained chimneys, but to Corin it meant a roof, a forge, and something strong enough to wash the road dust from his throat. "Reynolds Crossing," he muttered, eyeing the weather-worn sign as they passed beneath it. "Shithole of the frontier. Perfect." Lysandra walked beside him, humming off-key and dragging her dagger through puddles so the water rippled crimson from the old blood on the blade. Her undead hound trotted close behind, ribs visible through the gaps in its hide. "You pick the nicest vacation spots," she said. "Shut it. Need my blade oiled, maybe a new edge." "Your sword's fine," she teased. "You just want to play with hammers and smell like smoke?" He gave a short grunt that might have been a laugh. "Better than smelling like you." They passed a group of armed men lounging beneath a canopy, local militia by the look of them, their breastplates painted with a sloppy red hand. The soldiers watched the pair with open suspicion. Lysandra smiled sweetly and wiggled her fingers in greeting. Corin ignored them. "Stay out of sight," he said quietly. "We'll get what we need and move on before someone asks questions. Never any fun." He stopped at the blacksmith's first. The forge glowed faintly within, throwing orange light across racks of half-finished tools. The smith, a broad, nervous man with burn scars up his arms, froze when Corin ducked under the lintel. "Need oil, whetstone, and an hour with your fire?" Corin said, voice flat. The man nodded quickly and began fetching supplies. Corin worked in silence, methodical as a machine, oiling, sharpening, wiping the steel clean. When he was finished, he flipped a small pouch of coin onto the bench and stepped back into the rain. Lysandra was nowhere in sight. "Figures," he muttered. He looked up the street. The tavern sign creaked on its hinges, the copper hearth, and the smell of sour ale drifted through the drizzle. Corin hesitated only a moment before heading that way. Inside, heat and noise hit him at once. A fire burned low in the hearth, throwing more smoke than light. The place was crowded with miners and off-duty soldiers, laughter rising over the clatter of mugs. Corin kept his hood up, pushed to the bar, and ordered something cheap. When the barkeep slid a mug toward him, he took a long swallow, grimaced, and muttered, "Gods, that's vile. Another swallow anyway." He told himself it was to stay dry, to listen for rumors about the mountain, to keep his edge sharp in its own way. But the way his hand lingered on the mug said otherwise. From the corner of his eye, he watched a few militiamen bicker over dice. One of them slammed a fist on the table and shouted, "Double or nothing, you bastard!" Another laughed, spilling ale. Corin turned away. Noise was a waste, time was a waste, but the burn of the drink was steadying. Outside, Lysandra had drifted to the market square, trailing chaos like perfume. She stopped at a merchant's stall where cheap jewelry hung from tarnished hooks. The vendor flinched when she touched a silver chain. "Pretty," she said. "Almost makes this place look civilized." "It's not for sale," the man stammered. Lysandra's smile widened. "Everything's for sale. You just have to name a price you can't live without." When he still didn't answer, she laughed softly and walked away, the chain already looped around her wrist. The merchant didn't dare stop her. She caught sight of a few villagers being herded toward the garrison yard, hands bound, escorted by soldiers with cudgels. Her smile faded, curiosity replacing amusement. "Well," she murmured, "someone's been busy." The hound growled low beside her. She stroked its mangy head. "Easy, love. We'll see what they're up to soon enough." By the time Corin left the tavern, the drizzle had turned to fog. His mood was calmer, his steps heavier. He found Lysandra waiting by the well, idly tossing her dagger and catching it by the blade. "Done with your shopping?" she asked, too innocent. "Forge is set," he said shortly. "We move at dawn." "Of course we do." "And until dawn?" He didn't answer. The silence between them stretched thick with rain and the muffled sounds of a town trying not to notice them. Somewhere beyond the square, a woman screamed. Corin's jaw tightened. "What now?" Lysandra's grin returned, sharp and delighted. "Looks like your militia friends are busy again." "Fuck me," he muttered. "I don't have time for this." "Then I'll make time for both of us." She turned toward the sound, her hound padding after her. Corin swore under his breath, rubbed a hand over his face, and followed. "Every damn town," he muttered. "Every single God's forsaken town." They followed the sound through the fog. The rain had slowed to a mist now, beating on their cloaks as they stepped into the town square. A small crowd had gathered near the garrison gates. Villagers forced to their knees in the mud, heads bowed. Militia men stood around them, cudgels and pikes in hand, laughing and shouting over one another. A man in a captain's cloak paced before the prisoners, barking orders. "Stealing from the stores, is it? Thought we wouldn't notice the missing grain." He kicked one of the kneeling men square in the chest, sending him sprawling. The others flinched but didn't move. Lysandra stopped at the edge of the square, tilting her head. Her undead hound sat obediently beside her, tail twitching. "Well," she murmured, "that's charming." Corin said nothing, his expression unreadable beneath his hood. One of the soldiers backhanded a woman who had tried to speak. She fell silent, clutching her cheek, eyes fixed on the ground. Lysandra smiled faintly. "Poor folk," she said, her tone light as rain. "Wish we could help, but—" Corin's jaw tightened. "Good," he said flatly. "We're in agreement for once." He turned, already walking away. "Let's move before— you two." The shout came from behind them. One of the militiamen had noticed their cloaks, their weapons. "Hold it right there." Corin stopped mid-step, swore softly under his breath, and turned. The soldier was young, barely more than 20, but he carried himself like a man who thought the uniform made him untouchable. "You're not from here," he said, approaching. "Orders say we're to process all travelers. You'll come with me." Corin's tone was flat. "We're just passing through." "That's not how it works," the soldier said. "Town's under protection of the Red Hand. Outsiders get checked." He stepped closer, too close, his hand reaching for Lysandra's arm. "Let's not make this—" He didn't finish the sentence. Lysandra moved like smoke. One flick of her wrist, the black dagger flashed, and the soldier's throat opened with a wet gasp. He staggered, clutching his neck, blood spilling through his fingers. Lysandra caught him as he fell, easing him to the ground almost tenderly. "Shh," she whispered. "Quiet now." She wiped the blade on his cloak and straightened, smiling at Corin. Corin's sigh was long, heavy, resigned. "God's fucking damn it, Lysandra. Don't act so surprised," she said. "You knew how this would end." "Yeah," he muttered, drawing his broadsword. "I just hoped it'd take more than 5 minutes." The square had gone silent. Every militiaman had turned toward them now, disbelief giving way to fury. "Kill them?" the captain roared. Corin rolled his shoulders, the steel of his sword glinting in the gray light. "Fuck's sakes." Lysandra laughed, soft, delighted. "I thought you liked efficiency." He grinned grimly. "I do." The first soldier charged, spear raised. Corin met him with a single, brutal swing that split the man from collarbone to hip. Before the body hit the ground, Lysandra was already moving, her dagger flicking through the air, catching another man across the jaw. The fight was swift, almost surgical. Corin's strikes were clean and precise, built on years of battlefield muscle memory. Lysandra's were elegant, cruel, a dance painted in red. The hound tore into a third man, dragging him screaming into the mud. When the last of the soldiers fell, the captain stumbled back, blade trembling in his hands. What are you?" Lysandra crossed the distance before he could finish, pressing the point of her dagger beneath his chin. "Passing through," she said softly. Then she pushed. He fell wordless into the mud. Corin wiped his sword on a corpse and spat. "That's the last time I let you talk." "Oh, don't pout," Lysandra said. "You were magnificent." "Fuck off." She smiled and turned her gaze back toward the cages at the edge of the garrison yard, where a dozen villagers still huddled, too afraid to run. "Well, since we've gone through all that trouble, might as well see what the fuss was about." Corin followed her gaze, grimacing. "Wasting daylight." "You're wasting a perfectly good opportunity to play hero," she said. He grunted but walked to the cages anyway. The lock snapped easily beneath his boot. The villagers poured out, stunned and silent. One man stammered a shaky thank you, another bowed his head, weeping. Corin said nothing. He just sheathed his sword and stepped aside to let them pass. All but one. A young woman lingered at the back, pale hair plastered to her face by the rain. She looked at him, eyes wide and uncertain. Corin caught her arm as she tried to slip past. "You," he said. Her breath caught. What? You're coming with us." Lysandra arched a brow. "Collecting souvenirs now?" The other villagers froze, exchanging frightened glances. "Please," one of them said. "She's just a farm girl." Corin's blade flashed in a single clean stroke. The man dropped where he stood, blood darkening the mud. No one spoke after that. Lysandra chuckled quietly, covering her mouth. "You really do have a way with people." He shot her a glance. That told her what he would say. "Fuck off." The girl struggled to keep Corin's pace as he dragged her from her arm, too terrified to resist. Lysandra fell into step beside him, humming softly again. "See? I told you this town had potential." She smiled. "Fun." Behind them, the rain washed the blood from the cobbles, carrying it in thin red streams down the gutters. The rain had thinned to a mist by the time they reached the edge of town. The cottages gave way to stunted trees and a low stone wall, half collapsed under moss and neglect. Crows circled overhead, their cries thin against the gray. Corin shoved the girl forward with a curt gesture. "Stop." She stumbled, catching herself against a birch trunk slick with rain. The mud clung to her skirt, streaking the pale cloth brown. Lysandra circled her slowly, eyes running up and down in deliberate assessment. The girl was young, no older than 20, with ash blonde hair pulled into a loose braid, rainwater dripping from the ends. Her eyes were a clear, startled blue, wide with the kind of fear that never needed words. A simple silver chain rested at her throat, hung with a small glass bead that caught what little light there was. "Well?" Lysandra murmured. Look at you, a porcelain doll left out in the storm. Corin crossed his arms. What's your name, girl? The girl hesitated, glancing from him to Lysandra and back again. Marin. Pretty name, Lysandra said, voice soft and amused. For a farmer's daughter. Marin didn't reply. She stood very still, shoulders trembling. Lysandra stepped closer, close enough for the girl to smell the faint scent of oil and iron on her clothes. She lifted the necklace between 2 fingers, tilting it toward the light. Shame to waste something this lovely on the countryside. Marin's breath caught. Please. Lysandra slipped the chain free in one smooth motion. The clasp never even clicked. Don't worry, she said, tucking it into her pocket. I'll keep it safe for you. Corin swore under his breath. The girl flinched when the hound padded closer, its cloudy eyes locking on her. Corin snapped his fingers once and it fell back instantly, obedient. He studied Marin for a long moment. You know the roads around here? She nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Good. You'll walk ahead. You stop when I tell you. She nodded again, clutching her arms close to her chest. Corin stepped closer to Marin. Lysandra leaned toward Corin as he stepped closer to Marin. You're soft today. Corin, never taking his eyes off of Marin. You don't know what soft is. She hummed, smirking. Remind me. He ignored her and unbuckled his belt.
Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. More chapters are on the way.